Chapter 1134. The morning that Tongning and Qiu Jin agreed to meet, Mother Su met with Nangong Quan. At first glance, Mother Su simply thought that he was like a giant and that protecting Su Yuran would be a piece of cake. At second glance, this man was very steady. These were Mother Su's first two impressions of Nangong Quan. "Hello, Auntie. To be honest, I'm quite surprised that you're not familiar with Yuran, yet you're so bold as to suggest starting a family with her?" Mother Su asked. "Tell me honestly, do you have an unmentionable illness?" "Auntie, don't worry, I'm healthy," Nangong Quan replied. "I want to marry Su Yuran because my daughter really likes her. I'm sorry, but I already have a 5-year-old daughter. Apart from that, I don't have any other female companions. If Yuran marries me, I will try my best to be loyal to her. As for my background, I'm sure you're aware of it. If Yuran marries into the Nangong family, I won't let her suffer." Mother Su was well aware of this fact. "Have you been in prison before?" "I did it to save someone. If I could go back in time, even if I knew I would end up in prison, I would still do it," Nangong Quan replied sincerely. "I know you well, but you probably don't understand how tough my daughter's life is. Just 2 days ago, her father cursed me to die right in front of her," Mother Su sneered. Mother Su sneered. "I know Yuran wants me to leave the Su family. She thinks she can take care of me and give me a good life. However, she has never imagined how difficult and gloomy an unmarried girl's life will be with a disabled mother. While other women can date prettily, she can only come home and take care of my basic needs. While other women are in relationships, she has to work multiple jobs to pay for my medical bills and our living expenses. She's taking life too lightly. I don't want her to live such a tough life. Mr. Nangong, I'm not afraid that you'll laugh at me, but I want to find a man that's trustworthy enough to save my daughter from her original family. That way, I won't have to worry about anything anymore. I can agree to let the two of you be together, but she must like you. Otherwise, she'll just be another me. This is the direction you need to work towards. I'll ask her to move out of the Su family so that it'll be more convenient for you. Of course, I'll be watching you at all times. If you don't treat my daughter well, then I'll pretend we never met today." "I will," Nangong Quan nodded. "Don't worry." Nangong Quan could feel how bitter his mother was. But it was also because of this bitterness that the greatness of maternal love was highlighted. So, as soon as Mother Su returned home, she gave Su Yuran a phone call. "Let's go home and pack your things. You can move out and live on your own." "No, Mom, what happened? You don't have to worry about me. Your aunt will come over to take care of me. So, I'm going to clean up your room for your aunt to live in. You know how powerful your aunt is. You should go find a place to live." Although moving out was Su Yuran's dream, she wanted to take her mother with her. But, she had now been kicked out by her own mother. If it was someone else, Su Yuran would be worried. But, her auntie wasn't easy to deal with. She was a lawyer and specialized in divorce cases. This was the reason why her father didn't dare to act recklessly. If her father dared to be rude to her mother again, he wouldn't be able to handle her auntie. This was indeed much more useful than staying at home. After all, her auntie was all alone. If she moved in, she would be able to take care of her. Because of this, she decided to move out. It was a warm afternoon. Tongning headed straight for the cemetery Qiu Jin mentioned with a few bodyguards to negotiate with him. Although, as soon as she stepped into the cemetery, she smelled danger. But, she trusted her husband. The entrances and exits of the cemetery were all under Qiu Jin's control. This was obvious from the small number of people passing by. But, Tongning didn't care as she headed straight for Qiu Jin. The bodyguards followed not too far behind. At that moment, Qiu Jin was sweeping his wife's grave. As soon as he saw Tongning, he stood up and smiled. "I never thought you would actually come. I'm here to solve a problem," Tongning said as she removed her sunglasses. She then turned to Qiu Jin's wife's grave and bowed 3 times. "Solve a problem? Did you know? Without the Mo family, my son can already have a family and a career," Qiu Jin said as he stared into Tongning's eyes. "Then, let me tell you a story. There was a famous female celebrity that had a crazy father and a 13-year-old illegitimate son. Because of her death, her father was beaten to death and her son was sent to an orphanage. 15 years later, he was sent to prison for theft and has yet to be released. I'm sure you're more familiar with that female celebrity than anyone else. In that case, who's going to avenge her? Aren't her father and her son human? Your wife and son are simply avenging you. After all, this world doesn't allow any darkness to exist. Without the Mo family, how far did you think you could go? Without the Mo family, how long did you think you could live? Qiu Jin, you don't need to be so upset. If you had walked the right path and done your job properly, your wife and son wouldn't have been implicated because of the Nangong family's investigation. Isn't it obvious who implicated them? It's bad enough that you implicated your wife and son, but now you're implicating someone else's wife and son? Shut up! Chiu-jin roared. Who gave you the guts to slander me like this? Chiu-jin, tell me your conditions. What do I have to do for you to stop? Stop? Have you ever thought about leaving after coming here today? Chiu-jin sneered. I don't care who implicated my wife. All I know is, the Mo family are the culprit. I'm going to make the Mo family pay. Otherwise, all the years I've endured would have been for nothing. Tongning smiled calmly as she pulled out a yellow diary from her handbag. I found this in the old house you guys used to live in. I heard it was hidden in a crack in the wall. The house hasn't been maintained for many years, so it wasn't easy for me to get my hands on it. Don't you want to know what your wife's diary says? Did you think I'd fall for your tricks? You Mo family people love to argue. Chiu-jin yelled as he pointed to Tongning's nose. Chapter 1135. September 11th, you. That day, Qinghong came looking for me and told me that Chiu-jin was working for Mr. Nangong. I suddenly felt scared because I was about to marry this man, yet I didn't even know what his real occupation was. To protect him, I even scolded Qinghong away. But, that night, Qinghong died. I asked Chiu-jin what happened to Qinghong and he told me it was an accident. In the dark, I trembled in fear because I wanted to call the police. I was really scared. Tongning ignored Chiu-jin's insults. Instead, she opened up her diary and read out one of the contents. October 13th, little you. Today, I had another honest talk with Chiu-jin, but I realized he has no respect for life at all. I'm really disappointed. I really want to leave, but the doctor told me I'm pregnant. I suddenly don't know what to do. I think my parents are in heaven, they must hate me to death for being with a scumbag like him. I also hate myself. On the 6th of November, I made up my mind to leave because Chiu-jin was a complete demon. Why didn't he feel any remorse for what he had done? I couldn't forgive him anymore. I hate trash, especially trash that cheated on my feelings. Shut up! Chiu-jin yelled as soon as he heard Tongning read out these words. What do you know? Tongning did not continue. She simply closed the diary and smiled. Revenge for the woman you love and your unborn son? If I was your dead girlfriend and found out you used such a method to get revenge, I would hate you even more. Shut your mouth. Chiu-jin took a few steps forward angrily. So, he immediately yelled and all of his subordinates that were lying in ambush around the graveyard immediately stepped out. Tongning's bodyguard sensed the danger, so they quickly surrounded Tongning. Even though Chiu-jin had around 20 people on his side, Tongning's side was obviously outnumbered. Today, I want the Mo family to die with my wife and son. The person that should die the most is you. If you had walked the right path, your girlfriend wouldn't have died because of someone else's revenge. You are the one that caused her death. Nonsense! Chiu-jin retorted. Tongning did not continue to provoke him. Instead, she flipped to the last page of the diary. There were only 2 sentences written on it. May God help me leave this devil's side. Otherwise, I'd rather die. I hate thugs. Kill her for me. Chiu-jin's eyes were bloodshot as if he had been completely enraged by Tongning. He actually dared to threaten to kill her in front of everyone. More than 20 people rushed over. It was indeed a spectacular sight, making one feel fearful. But, Tongning remained calm as she stood in the same spot and asked, Did you really think you could touch me? You killed your wife and child, yet you keep saying that you want to frame someone else. You're not even a man. Why should I be afraid of you? What are you waiting for? Aren't you going to do it? The group of over 20 people moved closer to Tongning and the others and surrounded them. Sorry, superstar. Who told you to be Mo Ting's woman? Beat her to death. Chiu-jin's voice trembled as it echoed throughout the cemetery. However, at this time, 100 men dressed in black suits entered the cemetery in an orderly manner. Chiu-jin's men had no choice but to retreat. After all, who had ever seen a formation like this? Afterwards, Mo Ting stepped out from the crowd and approached Tongning. He then pulled her into his embrace. Are you okay? I'm fine. Tongning shook her head. This jerk is too stubborn. He refuses to admit his mistakes, Tongning said as she pointed to Chiu-jin with her chin. Tongning pointed her chin at Chiu-jin and said, You're a complete scumbag. You caused the death of your own wife and child, yet you're trying to push the blame onto someone else. Can't you handle it? Mo Ting lifted his head and looked at Chiu-jin as he asked in a deep voice, Who did you say you were going to beat to death? What's there to brag about when you're bullying someone with numbers? When dealing with trash, I don't mind being ruthless, Mo Ting replied. Plus, I don't need to be polite with you. Chiu-jin, even if you go back and train for another 100 years, you still won't be able to do anything to me. Since you insist on using the rules of the underworld, then let me teach you a lesson about the underworld style. If you want to make a move, fine. But, I can guarantee that you won't be able to hurt a single hair on my body. In fact, you will pay with the lives of everyone here. Mo Ting, if you're so capable, fight me one-on-one. I don't need to dirty my hands because of you. Mo Ting replied. Afterwards, Tongning threw the diary at Qiu Jin. Since you don't believe me, you can slowly read through it and find out who killed your wife. Qiu Jin did not believe Tongning's words at all. He simply thought she was lying. But, as soon as he picked up the diary and saw the familiar handwriting, he felt like he had been struck by lightning. It turned out, his fiancée really didn't like to hang out with gangsters. Back then, he thought she would be pleasantly surprised and think it was cool and hot-blooded. But, who would have thought, his fiancée had been plotting to leave him all this time? No, this couldn't be possible. Tongning must have made this up. There was no way he would believe her. So, he tore the diary apart. But, to his surprise, a photo of the couple fell out of the diary. Along with the photo, was a medical report. His fiancée's name was clearly written on it and the content stated that she had agreed to an abortion. Could it be that before she died, she had already secretly taken the child? Did she hate him that much? After reading through the yellowed report, Qiu Jin knelt to the ground. His mind was a mess, he didn't know how to accept everything that had just happened. Uncle Qiu, should we attack? Give me an answer? Uncle Qiu, Mo Ting took the opportunity and gestured for a group of tall men to step forward. A moment later, the 20-odd men were all pressed against the ground, leaving only Qiu Jin kneeling in front of his fiancée's grave. Tongning lifted her head and looked at Mo Ting. However, Mo Ting shook his head. No one knew what Qiu Jin was planning. What if he had gone crazy? In reality, Mo Ting was right. Qiu Jin had indeed gone crazy. But, he didn't do anything to anyone, he simply stabbed himself in the back of his hand with a knife. What have I been doing all these years? I'm such a fool. I actually thought you would be with me wholeheartedly. It turns out, you aborted the child a long time ago. Chapter 1136. And I was still delusional. I thought that if I followed Mr. Nangong, I would have a bright future, I would be able to give you the best life, and you would definitely look up to me. So, it turns out that you're looking down on me. What right do you have to look down on me? What right do you have? How could you do this to me? Do you know how torturous it was for me to carry this hatred for so many years? But in the end, he was stabbed by you. How much did you hate me that you aborted the child? Tell me. She would rather die than be with you. How much do you think she hates you? You men think it's glorious, righteous and impressive, but to a woman, you're just a thug. From her perspective, if she were to tell others about it, it would be embarrassing. That's why she was so ruthless. Your hands are stained with blood, and you still want to have happiness? That's impossible. There's karma in this world. That's why you've been played by yourself for so many years. Tongning's last sentence struck Qiu Jin's heart and destroyed his last line of defense. After all, Qiu Jin never regretted joining the Nangong family. In fact, it was the thing that he was most proud of. But, the thing that he was most proud of was the thing that hurt and shameful his fiancée the most. She even went as far as aborting their child. This shook Qiu Jin's firm belief. It seemed, for the rest of his life, he would have to struggle with this matter. What are people most afraid of? It wasn't a physical or psychological injury, but the belief that he had held on to for a long time had suddenly collapsed. It was actually wrong. Seeing Qiu Jin's crazy state, Qiu Jin's subordinates quickly walked out of the cemetery. From the looks of it, this man wasn't going to amount to much from now on. Meanwhile, the people that Mo Ting brought with him all retreated. Don't worry, the media won't hear a thing about what happened today, Mo Ting comforted. Let's go. Tongning turned to look at Qiu Jin and nodded her head. He's a stubborn person. Unfortunately, his stubbornness isn't in the right place. President, Uncle Qiu, isn't doing too well. As soon as the person that Nangong Quan had sent to gather information returned to Springfall, he reported the situation to Nangong Quan. He's been sitting in the cemetery on his own for 3 hours. No matter how we call for him, he won't respond. After hearing this, Nangong Quan turned around from the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at his subordinate. Did Tongning win? I don't know what Tongning did, but Uncle Qiu was already kneeling on the floor crying without even lifting a finger. Kill and destroy the heart. If a person had faith, if you didn't kill them, they would forever haunt you. But, destroying one's heart was different. Once a person's heart was dead, they would no longer be a threat to anyone. This was where Tongning excelled. President Mo brought over 100 people with him to support Tongning. But, not long after, they all left. As for the media, not a single word was leaked and the matter was resolved cleanly. Bring Uncle Qiu back and take good care of him, Nangong Quan instructed his subordinates without saying anything else. Since the couple had already dealt with Uncle Qiu, he didn't have to show up again and hurt his relationship with Uncle Chiu. So, he could now spend more time dealing with the matter between him and Su Yuran. Hatred could be used to help him grow, but it shouldn't be used as a weapon. After returning home, Tongning was exhausted as she leaned against Mo Ting's chest. "Do you know how worried I was after you went into the cemetery on your own?" Mo Ting asked. "I really regret putting you in danger. You didn't need to do that. Aren't I fine?" "I simply wanted to have a good sleep," Tongning yawned as she snuggled into Mo Ting's embrace. She then closed her eyes and fell asleep. Mo Ting sat on the sofa without moving as he allowed Tongning to fall asleep. Even though his limbs were stiff, he did not wake his wife up. It had been a long time since he hugged Tongning like this. Soon, Su Yuran returned with the child and Tongning woke up in a daze. Seeing Mo Ting not moving, she could tell that his body was stiff. But, he never said a word about it. So, Tongning helped him rub his body. "From now on, I won't dare to sleep on you. You'll wake up as soon as the child comes back," Mo Ting laughed. "I can't do anything about you," Tongning complained. Afterwards, she noticed Su Yuran was carrying some luggage on her back, so she asked curiously, "Where are you going with all these things?" "My mother kicked me out." Su Yuran smiled awkwardly. "But, don't worry, I've already found a place to stay. It's not far from here and I won't delay the kids from school." "That's not what I meant. I just wanted to ask if there's anything you need my help with," Tongning smiled gently. "From now on, you don't need to be so careful when you take Zishi and Zichen out. The matter with the Nangong family has been resolved. I'm doing well at the moment. Thank you, Miss Tang." On the surface, Su Yuran appeared to be an open-minded person. She would never ask for help from others. This was the attitude that she developed during her time in the military. Before she tried her best, she would never ask for help. Afterwards, she moved into the apartment that she found that day. The environment wasn't bad. Most importantly, it wasn't far from Hyatt Regency, so it would be more convenient for her to pick the kids up. That night, little Eggshell lay in bed after her bath. As she watched Nangong Quan holding a storybook, she immediately pounced on him. "Big sister has already moved, why haven't you done anything yet? Are you in a hurry?" Nangong Quan looked at his daughter as he helped her back onto the bed. "I want big sister to take me to and from school too. I'll be very happy," little Eggshell said as she pouted. "Plus, big sister is very cool and looks very compatible with daddy." "Really?" "Of course." Little Eggshell nodded her head. "Little Eggshell, hold on a little longer. We can't scare big sister, right?" Nangong Quan never expected that little Eggshell would like Su Yuran so much. Fine, now that Nangong Quan had moved and his mother-in-law had given the order, it was time for him to make his move. However, he hoped that Su Yuran wouldn't reject him too badly. He wasn't a romantic person and didn't know how to do beautiful things. But, he could appear when Su Yuran needed him the most. But, did she understand? To understand and get close to a person, you had to rely on your heart. But, Lu Che accidentally found out that Nangong Quan knew about the Su family. He found it interesting, so he told Mo Ting and Tongning about it. Mo Ting did not react, but Tongning was a little surprised. "Is Nangong Quan trying to steal Su Yuran from me? I'm not going to let him have his way." Chapter 1137. Soon, 3 months passed and Miss Chiao returned from her studies. Tongning immediately sent someone to the airport to welcome her. At the same time, Tongning's new post-production team, Star Shine, was completed and they were currently working together. Of course, there was still a lot of time for them to get used to it. By this time, the Ant Queen 2 was ready and Tongning had already selected the rest of the actors. All that was left was to arrange their schedules and auditions. Not long after, Hai Rui officially announced the cast of the Ant Queen 2. As usual, Tongning would be producing and Xiao Man would be directing. There would also be international martial arts superstar Old Long, new actress Fei Er, the popular young actor Luo Sheng and, of course, the main antagonist, Mo Ting. As soon as the cast was announced, the public immediately reacted. There was a lot to look forward to. The addition of Old Long was already a pleasant surprise, but this time, Mo Ting was going to take part as well. In fact, he was going to play the main antagonist. At the same time, the poster for The Ant Queen 2 clearly stated the theme: it was time to test the teacher-student relationship. In other words, the main plot of The Ant Queen 2 was to focus on the teacher-student relationship. Fans left comments excitedly urging Tongning to start filming. "I like Tongning's work because she doesn't follow the path of heroes and beauties. Instead, she gives up on romance. Instead, she explores relationships on a deeper level and makes me feel comfortable. Last time, it was a father and daughter. This time, it's a teacher-student relationship. Just thinking about it, it's a lot to watch. I wonder how this international superstar will be able to do against a big monster. Am I the only one that thinks President Mo's antagonist will be interesting? In The Ant Queen 1, his relationship was already so smooth. I can't wait to see him explode. Anticipation +1, Anticipation +2, they've only announced that they've finished filming now. When are they going to start? How torturous. Let's go look through all of President Mo and Mo Ting's works right now. We should be able to last a little longer. I think Tongning's involvement in the film and television industry has brought new life to the industry. I think the entire film industry should thank her. She simply did what she wanted to do. She wanted to fulfill Chiao Sen's wish. She wanted to stand side by side with Mo Ting at the top of the entertainment industry. Had she finally achieved it? Afterwards, someone researched Chiao Man's background and found out that she was actually Chiao Sen's daughter. On top of that, she was a famous photographer. In order to fulfill her father's last wish, she was prepared to dedicate the rest of her life to sci-fi. She originally thought that the public would have some objections towards a newcomer director like her, but surprisingly, everyone was very tolerant of her. This was because, as a director that wanted to be like her father, she was willing to give it her all. As a result, news about The Ant Queen 2 was everywhere. As Nan Gongquan sat in his office, he couldn't help but feel that the Mo couple were indeed strong and worthy opponents. President, should we start the second round of promotions for Parasite? Nan Gongquan shook his head, indicating that the timing wasn't right. There's no need. Focus on the production of Parasite. The final result is the best promotion. I understand. This is the perfect time for a sci-fi film. Although I don't want to admit it, Tongning has made a huge contribution, Nan Gongquan's assistant said. Otherwise, let's not talk about now. Even 20 years from now, Beijing may not even produce a decent sci-fi film. What do you think of Bai Junyi? Bai Junyi is indeed talented. The production didn't find the wrong person. That's good, Nan Gongquan nodded. He had high hopes for Parasite. Even if it couldn't compete with Hai Rui's The Ant Queen 2, as long as it was a good film, it wouldn't be buried. Afterwards, Nan Gongquan packed his things and drove over to Chiu Jin's home. But, Chiu Jin's subordinate told him, Uncle Chiu passed away 10 days ago. Why didn't anyone tell me? Nan Gongquan yelled. Why didn't anyone report such a big thing? Because Uncle Chiu passed away very suddenly. He hung himself, but the night before he passed away, he told me that he wanted to go overseas. Who would have guessed? Chiu Jin's subordinate replied, I even saw Uncle Chiu's packed luggage. Then, why didn't you call the police? The police came over and confirmed that he suffocated to death. He also left a suicide note, so they didn't investigate further. But, I still feel like something's not right. Why would someone that was about to go overseas suddenly choose to die? Plus, he only left a single sentence in his suicide note. Nan Gongquan was also in disbelief, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what was wrong. Just like that, Chiu Jin mysteriously disappeared. Yet, not a single person told him about this. He originally thought Chiu Jin was in a bad mood and needed to recover, so he didn't ask about it. But, who would have thought? Did you check Uncle Chiu's room in detail? Did you find anything suspicious? Nothing, I checked it. After speaking, the bald subordinate pulled out a phone from his drawer and handed it to Nan Gongquan. This is Uncle Chiu's phone. I checked his call history. On the night he tried to commit suicide, Uncle Chiu spoke to an unknown number for half an hour. What's his identity? I called him and asked. He bought car insurance. Nan Gongquan received the phone without saying a word. He suddenly wondered if there was someone else behind Uncle Chiu's back. But, before he had time to investigate further, he received a phone call from Su Yuran's mother. Mr. Nangong, can you please take Yuran to the registration office as soon as possible? Auntie, what's wrong? Her father's business failed and he's targeting her. Nan Gongquan's heart sank, but this wasn't what he was concerned about. Your voice is very weak. I'm fine. I'm fine. This definitely didn't sound like she was fine. After hanging up the phone, Nan Gongquan directly left Chiu Jin's home and drove over to Su Yuran's classroom. Afterwards, he directly dragged her out. Mr. Nangong, are you sure? Did you drag the wrong person? Your mother might be in danger. You should go home first, Nan Gongquan said as he pulled out his phone and showed Su Yuran a phone number. After confirming that it was her mother's phone number, Su Yuran turned to leave. But, Nan Gongquan held her back. I'll take you there. It'll be faster. Although Su Yuran was full of questions, she didn't have a better option. So, she boarded Nan Gongquan's car. It was strange. How did a stranger find out that her mother was in danger? Chapter 1138. How, do you know my mother? We have a bit of a history, Nan Gongquan replied. By the way, don't trust your auntie so much. Su Yuran didn't know what to say. She was simply worried about her mother. Nan Gongquan knew that she was nervous, so he sped up the car and drove her straight back to the Su family home. To avoid suspicion, Nan Gongquan did not accompany Su Yuran inside. Instead, he stood guard at the door in case Su Yuran needed his help. He never imagined that after observing this woman for so long, the first time he spoke to her was because of her mother. Su Yuran had no time to think about Nan Gongquan's problem as she ran straight into her mother's room. As soon as she pushed open the door, she found her lawyer auntie kicking her mother who was lying on the floor. "What are you doing?" Su Yuran asked her auntie angrily. The woman didn't expect Su Yuran to return home at a time like this, so she looked at her in a panic. "Yuran, why are you back? If I didn't come back, I wouldn't have known that my auntie was this good." Su Yuran rushed over, picked up her mother and placed her in a wheelchair. "Mom, are you okay?" Mother Su held onto her chest. At first, she wanted to say something, but as soon as she opened her mouth, blood flowed out. Su Yuran was so frightened that she immediately called the ambulance. But, as she carried her mother out of the Su family home to wait for help, she noticed Nan Gongquan's car was still parked outside. "What's wrong?" Although Su Yuran tried her best to hold back her tears, she almost burst into tears. "My mom's hurt is serious. I need to take her to the hospital." "Get in the car." "Okay." Su Yuran immediately boarded the car. At this time, her auntie also stepped out. Su Yuran glared at her auntie hatefully and simply said, "I'll deal with you when I get back." After speaking, Su Yuran boarded the car and allowed Nan Gongquan to take the mother and daughter to the hospital. After an examination by the doctor, they discovered that Mother Su had been beaten up in multiple places and her ribs were almost broken, and the culprit behind all this was her auntie. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed it. "Why did you warn me to be careful of my auntie?" While Mother Su was receiving treatment, Su Yuran asked Nan Gongquan, "Do you know something? When your mother called me just now, I heard some noise on the phone. It was a woman's voice insulting your mother and calling her big sister." "So that was how it was?" Su Yuran understood. "Thank you for today, Mr. Nangong. I'll treat you to a meal another day. But right now, I need to figure out what's going on. I can stay. I do have some history with your mother. If you don't believe me, you can ask her when she wakes up." Nan Gongquan insisted on staying at the hospital because he had to prevent Su Yuran's father from causing trouble. Mo Ting asked helplessly as he looked at his wife. "Don't you think it's interesting? Nan Gongquan doesn't like anyone else, yet he's interested in my tutor. I'm not looking down on Yuran, I'm just saying that Nan Gongquan's taste doesn't seem to fit the heavy makeup of the entertainment industry." Tongning laughed. "I can't believe he's actually getting involved with a skilled woman like Yuran. It's going to be interesting to watch." "Are you going to step in and stop him?" "I don't have the time to do that." Tongning laughed. "Nan Gongquan is actually a tough guy. If he ends up with Yuran, I'd be happy to see it happen. I heard that Yuran's life hasn't been easy either. If she ends up with Nan Gongquan, perhaps her life will change, just like how I married you." Chapter 1139. That night, Nan Gongquan instructed his assistant to prepare a room for the mother and daughter. As soon as little Eggshell heard about this, she was ecstatic. So, she clung onto Nan Gongquan and asked, "Is Big Sis coming to be my mother? Is she coming to live with us?" After hearing little Eggshell's question, Nan Gongquan placed her on his lap and explained, "Eggshell, Daddy is simply helping Big Sis to protect her and her mother from being bullied by outsiders. Big Sis isn't going to be your mother. At least, not yet. So, you need to be obedient and don't talk nonsense in front of Big Sis, okay?" Little Eggshell thought for a moment before she placed her hands on her hips and replied, "For the sake of Daddy's happiness, I'll endure it for now." Nan Gongquan didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at his daughter's mischievous expression, but it was because of this treasure that he couldn't bear to part with her. At least, if he had to choose between revenge and his daughter, he would choose his daughter without hesitation. Afterwards, Nan Gongquan coaxed little Eggshell to sleep. But, as he returned to his room to shower and get some rest, his mind kept replaying everything that happened that day at the Su family home. Su Yuran's experience, Su Yuran's reaction and Su Yuran's emotions, it was all in his mind and he couldn't get it out of his head. In fact, he even imagined that Su Yuran wasn't having a good time at the hospital. "Yuran, are you still angry?" Mother Su asked after noticing that her daughter hadn't said a word all night. "Am I? Mom, how could you endure it?" Su Yuran asked as she lifted her head and sobbed. "How could you endure such a huge injustice? It's been so many years since your mother was crippled. What haven't you seen? So, there's nothing to be angry about. After all, there's nothing I can do," Mother Su said in self-mockery. Mother Su said in self-mockery, I just want to protect you. I just want you to be safe. Nothing else matters. Mom, I will definitely get revenge for you. Mother Su smiled, but she did not respond to Su Yuran. After all, everything she did was because she wanted Su Yuran to have a good life. From the looks of it, Nan Gongquan was the perfect candidate for her son-in-law. So, she could only hope that the two of them would end up together. The next morning, Su Yuran was woken up by the sound of her phone ringing. Seeing that it was her auntie calling, Su Yuran immediately stepped out of her hospital room and walked into the hallway to pick up the call. Yuran, your father wants you to come home. I'll be right back, Su Yuran replied before she put down her phone and returned to the hospital room. Who called? Auntie Su asked. Mom, I'm going to go to work first. I need to pick up Tongning's 2 babies. After that, I'll come back and take care of you, Su Yuran explained casually. Go ahead. Mama Su waved her hand. If I have a problem, I'll find a nurse. After leaving the hospital, Su Yuran hailed a taxi and returned to the Su family home. However, Nan Gongquan had already arrived at the hospital. As soon as he saw Su Yuran rushing out, he immediately chased after her. After entering the Su family home, Su Yuran spotted her and her mother's suitcases in the middle of the living room. Father Su and her auntie were sitting on the sofa in the living room, sipping on their morning tea as if nothing had happened. Since you're back, you should take your and your mother's things with you, Father Su said. The divorce papers are also on the dining table. Take them with you. Yuran, stop hesitating. Before your father regrets his decision, you should leave. Su Yuran's auntie said anxiously. This is your last chance. I don't quite understand what you're saying, auntie. Your father has recently run into some problems with his business and is currently waiting for a cash flow. But, your father's business partner said that if you're willing to marry him, he's willing to invest money to help your father overcome his difficulties. But, he's an old man in his 50s. How could I watch you jump into a pit of fire? So, I begged your father. It wasn't easy for him to agree to let you go. In other words, Auntie had already done everything she could for Su Yuran, so she should take her and your mother's things and leave. Auntie, are you trying to say that my father almost sold me off? Yuran, you can't say that. The Su family has treated you well. Shut up, Su Yuran said to her auntie. Su Yuran said to her auntie in a low voice, you might be shameless, but I'm not. Auntie must be trying to make a name for herself by stealing her brother-in-law and kicking her first wife out of the house. Did you think that anyone would believe you? Auntie, don't you know who I'm working for? Su Yuran laughed. Don't you know that I'm tutoring Tongning's 2 children? Su Yuran's auntie froze as she looked at Father Su. You wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare. Su Yuran's eyes turned red as she ran over to her auntie and grabbed her by her clothes as she dragged her up the stairs. I'm going to throw you down from the 2nd floor right now and cripple your legs. I want to see if the person downstairs will still like you. Su Yuran, how dare you? Father Su yelled from downstairs. Yuran, don't do anything reckless. Su Yuran's auntie was no match for the skilled Su Yuran. Su Yuran, do you want to go to jail? If you go to jail, I'm going to torture your mother. These words successfully angered Su Yuran and struck fear in her heart. She wasn't afraid of anything, but she was afraid that if something happened to her, no one would take care of her mother. Let go. Let go. Perhaps, because Su Yuran had been inside for too long, Nan Gongquan was worried that something might have happened to her. So, he didn't care if people would gossip about him as he directly entered the Su family home. But, the front door wasn't closed. So, the first thing that Nan Gongquan saw was Su Yuran grabbing onto a woman and standing on the 2nd floor steps while her father roared in anger. Yuran, let go. It's not worth it. As soon as Su Yuran heard these sudden words, she turned to look at Nan Gongquan in surprise. Listen to me, I can help you get what you want. But, it's not worth it if I don't sacrifice myself. Su Yuran grabbed onto her auntie's shirt, but in the end, she released her grip and pushed her to the side. Afterwards, she walked down the steps and approached Nan Gongquan. Why are you here? I'm here to take you away from here. Nan Gongquan replied as he placed his arm around her shoulder. Since you're leaving the Su family, it's time to cut all ties. Who are you? Father Su finally reacted and asked about Nan Gongquan's identity. Chapter 1140. Nan Gongquan did not say a word as he handed Father Su his business card and retreated to Su Yuran's side. From the looks of it, your luggage has already been packed. In that case, we don't need to waste any more effort. Thank you, Mr. Su, Nan Gongquan said politely. As soon as Father Su saw Nan Gongquan's business card, he realized that this was the CEO of Springfall Film and Television that was mentioned in the news recently. In fact, he also ran a technology company in the US. May I ask who Mr. Nangong and my daughter are? Yuran is my fiancé. I've never had the chance to visit her, but I never thought I'd encounter a situation like this. Nangong Quan laughed before he wrapped his arm around Su Yuran's waist and turned around. Let's go, Mr. Nangong, please wait. By the way, Mr. Su, I think it's time for you to receive a lawyer's letter. Also, Ms. Su, you cheated on your wife and abused your disabled wife. Someone needs to step in. I know that Yuran's auntie is a famous lawyer, but no matter how famous you are, you can't go up against my entire team of lawyers. From now on, Yuran has nothing to do with the Su family. Mr. Su, if I find out that you've contacted Yuran or Auntie Su in private again, I'm sorry, I will make you suffer. Originally, when I found out that the Su family was in a bit of trouble, I wanted to offer my help. But, from the looks of it, it's better to give the money to Yuran as pocket money. What do you say, Yuran? Su Yuran was currently in Nangong Quan's arms. Although she didn't know why Nangong Quan wanted to help her, she was grateful that he had stepped forward. At this time, Father Su suddenly changed his attitude toward Su Yuran and softened. Yuran, can you lend me that money? Even if it's a loan, I will definitely return it to you. However, Su Yuran simply smiled. If I really had that much money, I would use it to fight my mother's lawsuit. I would at least take half of your assets. Even though I don't really care. As soon as Father Su heard this, his face turned pale. Yuran, don't treat Dad like this. Yuran, you want me to help you? Sure, you know what I want. Su Yuran said as she looked at her auntie. Of course, Su Qingsong's father understood what she meant. He immediately raised his hand and swore, I will make her get out of my sight right now and never appear in the Su family again. That's enough? What she owes my mother is far more than just getting lost. Qizhong, how could you do this to me? Su Yuran's auntie looked at Father Su in shock. Are you going to sacrifice me for the sake of money? Nothing is more important than the company now. When I have nothing, I don't believe that you will still be willing to follow me. Father Su snorted. I truly love you. For you, I even divorced. Where do you want me to go now? I don't care where you go. As long as I can help Yuran vent her anger. Father Su suddenly acted strangely righteous. Leave now. Leave. Father Su didn't just say it verbally, he even used his hands to push Su Yuran's auntie away. Didn't the tables turn a little too suddenly? Su Yuran's auntie never imagined that after so many years of hard work, just as she was about to succeed, Su Yuran's fiancé would suddenly appear out of nowhere and ruin her plans. Qizhong, don't chase me away, okay? As she watched the two put on an act, Su Yuran simply felt one thing, how disgusting. Let's go then. Nangong Quan wasn't interested in watching the two women push each other, so he directly helped Su Yuran carry her luggage. No, Yuran, don't go yet. Mr. Nangong, look, you want me to help you? Sure, it depends on how you treat my mother. After saying this, Su Yuran turned around and followed Nangong Quan out of the Su family home without looking back. Regardless of everything, Nangong Quan had helped her today. Ever since she was born, she had never been able to hold her head up high in front of Father Su. Have you vented the anger in your heart? Hearing Nangong Quan's question, Su Yuran shook her head. Even if these two men were hacked to pieces, it wouldn't be enough to vent my mother's anger. If I told you that I could continue to help you vent your anger, would you make what I just said become true? Nangong Quan asked. For some reason, even though he had told himself to stay calm, he suddenly felt like he was being too rude. Seeing that Su Yuran didn't know what to say, Nangong Quan immediately said, Sorry, I scared you. No, I wanted to ask, what did you say? About my fiancé. Nangong Quan replied. Don't misunderstand, I didn't make this decision on a whim. I've been thinking about it for a few months now. I know you're not familiar with me, but, seeing Nangong Quan's nervousness, Su Yuran suddenly laughed. Haha, is it funny? Nangong Quan was a little upset. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have asked. Mr. Nangong, I can tell that you're a good person and I'm grateful that you helped me today. But, you're taking advantage of me. Am I? But, I'm serious, Nangong Quan emphasized. I don't mind being friends with you, but isn't it a little strange for us to be engaged so quickly? It's the first time they've met, yet they've already registered their marriage. After hearing this, Su Yuran finally realized how serious Nangong Quan was. So, she put away her smile and looked into his eyes in seriousness. In reality, deep down, she had the urge to drag Nangong Quan into a marriage. But, logic told her that it wasn't possible. She knew that she was still immersed in Nangong Quan's charm. But, she didn't want to miss out on a man like him. So, she smiled. Let's pretend we went on a blind date today. Let's start from a blind date and get to know each other better. What do you think? After hearing this, Nangong Quan let out a sigh of relief. As long as you agree. To have such a rich man by her side and help her over and over again, as a woman, it was no wonder that she was tempted. After all, every woman loved a fairy tale. But, Su Yuran was well aware of her own situation. Nan Gongquan was rich and powerful. He could find any woman he wanted. So, she needed to find out if Nan Gongquan was acting on a whim or if he was serious about their relationship. After all, everything happened too suddenly. Little did she know, Nan Gongquan had been secretly watching her for a few months now. Chapter 1141. After the couple came to an agreement, they decided to first pick Mother Su up from the hospital. But, Su Yuran was worried that Mother Su would overthink things, so before they arrived at the hospital, she asked for Nan Gongquan's opinion. Can we not tell anyone about our relationship for now? Nan Gongquan turned to look at Su Yuran and nodded his head. Although he was a little disappointed, he still respected Su Yuran. I understand. Thank you. Su Yuran did not say it out loud, but Nan Gongquan understood the meaning behind her words. It would be troublesome to break up in the future. So, in front of Mother Su, the two women were extremely polite. It was as if Su Yuran didn't care about what they had discussed earlier in the car. To make things easier for Mother Su, her room was downstairs and Su Yuran's room was upstairs, opposite Nan Gongquan's and next to Little Eggshell's. If Little Eggshell sees you when she comes home from school, she'll be so happy. But, I don't think it's a good idea to do this. Su Yuran was worried about what others thought of her. There's only me and Little Eggshell here. We're the only two people in the Nangong family. Who would say anything? You and Auntie can stay here. I can temporarily sleep in the company's apartment. I'll leave Little Eggshell to you. As Nan Gongquan spoke, he grabbed a few sets of clothes from his room and prepared to take them to the office. Don't worry. Su Yuran nodded her head. She was actually grateful for Nan Gongquan's thoughtfulness. He had helped her avoid the awkwardness of seeing Nan Gongquan. Moreover, she couldn't stay here for long. She had to find a place as soon as possible and settle down with Mother Su. Between the two of them, they were still so polite. However, it was precisely this kind of ambiguous feeling that made people even more addicted. That night, Little Eggshell returned home full of anticipation. Sure enough, she saw the big sister she wanted. Wow, Daddy didn't lie to me. Big sister can really keep me company. Little Eggshell, don't be rude. Greet them first, Nan Gongquan said. Little Eggshell put down her backpack and politely walked over to Mother Su. She greeted her grandmother before she circled around Su Yuran. Actually, Su Yuran also liked Little Eggshell. So, she was quite lucky because the two Mo family treasures were also very obedient. By the way, why don't I go resign from Tongning's job? Otherwise, there's no need. I don't dislike the couple. Plus, you need friends. By being friends with Tongning, he could learn a lot and receive protection. There was nothing bad about it. But, your Nangong family and Mo family, while Little Eggshell and Mother Su weren't looking, Nan Gongquan whispered beside Su Yuran's ear, is this considered being considerate of me? Su Yuran's face turned red as she lowered her head. I just don't think what I'm doing is right. To be able to earn money from the hands of my enemies is also a kind of ability. You don't need to resign. After speaking, Nan Gongquan lifted his shirt and said to Su Yuran, I'll leave Little Eggshell to you tonight. Daddy, where are you going? Go to the company to work overtime. Tonight, Big Sister will tell you a story and coax you to sleep. Nan Gongquan originally thought that Little Eggshell would be disappointed. But, to his surprise, she was unusually excited. It seemed, he was destined to be lonely that night. Mr. Nangong, it's already so late. Take care of yourself. Yuran, we are guests, how could we chase the host away? Mother Su saw through Nan Gongquan's intentions, so she quickly said, we've done everything right, there's nothing to hide. Mr. Nangong, you can just say that we're distant cousins. That way, there won't be any problems. What do you think? Daddy, I can't sleep when you're not home, Little Eggshell's mischievous mind began to think. Then, don't go to the office. Su Yuran said calmly. Nan Gongquan nodded his head. In reality, deep down, he didn't want to stay at the office on his own either. Afterwards, Su Yuran helped Mother Su sleep and told her everything that happened at the Su family home that day. After hearing this, Mother Su laughed. Give me the divorce papers to sign. Right now, the Su family is begging you. Mom, none of this belongs to me. Yuran, did you think I covet something from Mr. Nangong? I'm not that kind of person. I know that we're only staying here for a few days. I'm sure you'll find a good place to settle down. After hearing this, Su Yuran relaxed and nodded her head. Since you've thought it through, then, we'll definitely get a divorce. A moment later, Su Yuran tried to sneak back into her room, but Nan Gongquan's bedroom door was wide open. Su Yuran knocked on the door and reminded him, do you want me to close it for you? No need, I'm used to it. Little Eggshell will come in anyway, Nangong Quan replied. You should get some rest. But, aren't you afraid that I'll see something I shouldn't? This man didn't know how to avoid suspicion. After all, there were 2 female guests in his home. If Eggshell can't see anything, then you won't either. Don't worry. After speaking, Nangong Quan returned to his work. From the looks of it, taking over Springfall was a lot of pressure for Nangong Quan. Su Yuran did not continue to disturb him. Instead, she quietly returned to her room and lay down on the unfamiliar bed. Everything that was happening in front of her seemed so surreal. Nangong Quan lifted his head and looked at the door opposite him. He deliberately left it open so that he could appear in front of Su Yuran at any time. Wasn't that what love was all about? You wanted to see the other person at all times. The next day, Su Yuran returned to her normal work schedule. However, before she picked up the Mo twins, she first dropped Little Eggshell off at school before returning to pick up the twins. As a result, a few days later, Tongning noticed that Su Yuran was also taking care of Little Eggshell. So, she said to Su Yuran, if the Nangong family doesn't mind, you can take Little Eggshell with you and pick up my 2 sons. We can go to school together and save you the trouble of running back and forth. After hearing this, Su Yuran was shocked. You found out? Did you think you could hide it from me? I'm sorry, Miss Tang, it's fine, I don't mind. Plus, my 2 rascals still owe Little Eggshell a life-saving favor, Tongning said with a mysterious smile. From now on, you can bring Little Eggshell along to pick up Zishi and Zichen. Chapter 1142. Although this was what Tongning said, Su Yuran did not do it. After all, she cared more about Nangong Quan's feelings. To be exact, she had unknowingly become more concerned about Nangong Quan's feelings. So, she ended up taking Little Eggshell and the Mo brothers to school separately. She had been staying at the Nangong family home for a few days now, but she hadn't actually seen Nangong Quan that much. After all, he was quite busy. He had just returned to Beijing, so he didn't have as many years of experience as Mo Ting did. So, he had to do everything himself. Plus, Little Eggshell had someone to take care of, so Nangong Quan had more time to focus on work. This made Su Yuran waver a little. She felt like Nangong Quan was simply saying it on a whim. But, that night, just as she was about to return to her room, she bumped into Nangong Quan on the stairs. As their eyes met, Su Yuran smiled. Just as she was about to return to her room, Nangong Quan called out to her, "Are you free tomorrow night?" "Huh? Do you want to go watch a movie?" Nangong Quan asked in seriousness. Su Yuran was a little surprised, but she quickly nodded her head. "Okay, let's meet outside the theater at 9 p.m. Since he couldn't let Little Eggshell and Mother Su know, they had to go their separate ways. So, Nangong Quan nodded his head and returned to his room. Watch a movie. Su Yuran was a little annoyed by Nangong Quan. This man had promised to treat her like a blind date, yet, he had been busy with work for a few days and claimed that he wasn't interested in her. Now, he was asking her to watch a movie. Was this a man's trick? Was he playing hard to get? Regardless, Su Yuran still dressed up a little. She put on a little black dress and even tried on high heels. Although it was difficult to walk, she still arrived at the theater punctually at 9 p.m. By this time, Nangong Quan had already arrived. Although he did not say a word when he saw Su Yuran dressed up like this, it was obvious that he was more used to her t-shirt and jeans. She looked more energetic that way. From now on, let's not go out like this. After hearing this, Su Yuran nodded her head. Okay. She also hated high heels. Let's go in then. After speaking, Nangong Quan extended his hand toward Su Yuran. Originally, he could have just sat in the VIP room and watched a movie with Su Yuran and Tongning. But, he felt that Su Yuran preferred to get to know each other in a way that was close to life. So, even though they were about to be recognized, he insisted on taking Su Yuran to the cinema. At this time, a black car was parked not too far from the entrance of the theater. Inside the car sat an old man in his 60s with a head of white hair. As he watched Nangong Quan and Su Yuran disappear into the distance, he cursed, "Useless things." Instead of seeking revenge, he spent all his time flirting with girls. "Sir, we are about to set off. Let's go." The old man stomped his walking stick and directly ordered the driver to set off. "Investigate this woman's identity later. Yes, my grandson has grown up and has completely forgotten the hatred of the Nangong family, but I won't forget. Fortunately, I can still do it myself. If I wait for the Nangong family to avenge me, I probably won't be able to do it in this lifetime." Looking at Nangong Quan now, it was obvious why Qiu Jin was so useless back then. So, he deserved to die. At this time, Tongning and Mo Ting did not receive any news that Elder Nangong had already been released from prison. After all, everyone assumed that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Even Nangong Quan didn't know about his grandfather's current situation. Because Elder Nangong had performed many meritorious deeds in prison and had his sentence reduced 4 times, he even made new friends. So, as soon as he was released, he changed his name and did not tell anyone. After all, he didn't want to trust anyone and was afraid that his enemies would seek revenge on him. It wasn't easy for him to recover from his illness in the US. When he heard that his grandson had returned, he originally thought that he would wait for him to seek justice for him. Who would have thought, all he saw was Nangong Quan's love affair. What a disappointment. As expected, he could only rely on himself. He wanted to see just how impenetrable the Mo family that was led by Mo Ting was. Meanwhile, over at Tongning's side, preparations for The Ant Queen 2 were all set. All they were waiting for was a good day to start filming. The newly selected actors knew that acting in Tongning's film wasn't easy, so they were unusually humble and hardworking. Luo Sheng, in particular, had long been looking forward to acting in Tongning's film. Although he was personally discovered by Tongning, Tongning never chose roles based on favoritism. So, even if she personally brought him out, Tongning wouldn't consider him if he wasn't suitable. Of course, Tongning was personally involved in choosing the main cast and crew. But, what about the rest of the crew? Elder Nangong used all sorts of channels to find out about Tongning's progress. But, he only had one motive: to infiltrate the explosives team. If there was a chance for him to personally make a move, he definitely had to infiltrate the department that didn't seem suspicious, but had a lot of potential. All he had to do was arrange an accident and Mo Ting would be able to survive. Because he had to hide his identity and not be recognized, Elder Nangong didn't even want to see his own grandson. However, he would occasionally tail him and discover that he was completely immersed in his love affair. Let's pick a good day. The Ant Queen 2 foot can officially start filming. Late at night, before the couple had gone to sleep, Tongning said in a daze as she nestled in Mo Ting's arms, "I can't wait to see you act as the villain." Mo Ting gently stroked Tongning's back as his lips curved upwards. As long as it was his wife's wish, he would definitely satisfy it. Get some rest first. Let's discuss the time tomorrow. Ting, although I know you're tired, I selfishly hope that you'll appear in every single one of my sci-fi films. You need to be my professional client. You'll only appear in my films. Just like how you'll only be my manager for the rest of your life. Mo Ting enjoyed this special method of possession because it meant that in Tongning's heart, he would always be one of a kind. I'll do as you wish. After hearing this, Tongning suddenly opened her eyes and looked up at Mo Ting with a little infatuation and lust. Mo Ting was deeply attracted by the look in her eyes. Chapter 1143. Elder Nangong made a lot of friends while he was in prison. So, after he was released, he received help from his friends and spent a long time recovering from his illness in the US. Now that he was back, he used the surname Zhang to appear in front of the public. He even obtained a certificate to be an explosives technician so that he could sneak into Tongning's team. As for Nangong Quan, he was going to pretend that he didn't have a grandson. After watching the film, Nangong Quan and Su Yuran's relationship became a little closer. Originally, they both had ulterior motives for the film. Su Yuran simply liked having Nangong Quan by her side, but Nangong Quan didn't like watching American popcorn movies. He simply wanted to keep her company. That night, the couple returned home together. But, as they arrived at the front door, Su Yuran said to Nangong Quan, "I'm going up first. You can come back later. I'm afraid little Eggshell is asleep by now, but my mom might not be." Su Yuran stuck her head out of the car and looked in the direction of Mother Su's bedroom. Seeing that the lights were off, she relaxed. "Okay. I'll get out of the car first." As Nangong Quan looked at her cautious expression, he did not get angry. He hoped that Su Yuran could experience the beauty of being in a relationship and not end up becoming an engaged couple like she said. Even though, in his heart, that was exactly what he had been hoping for all along. The couple entered the living room one after the other and returned to their respective rooms. But, before they returned to their rooms, Nangong Quan suddenly grabbed onto Su Yuran and gave her a scare. "What's wrong?" Nangong Quan hugged Su Yuran for a few seconds before he let go. "Go to sleep." Su Yuran's heart raced like it was about to jump out of her throat. It had been a long time since she last felt this way. It wasn't that she didn't admire people when she was in the military, but she only admired them. She never thought about actually getting close to someone. But, after being hugged by Nangong Quan, Su Yuran truly felt that she was in a relationship. She was in a relationship. Nangong Quan's embrace was extremely comforting. That night, the couple lay in their own beds, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. They were afraid of the sudden urge, so they tried their best to control themselves. As a result, Su Yuran woke up the next morning with a cold. But she still insisted on taking little Eggshell to school and planned to pick up the two rascals at the Mo family home. But Nan Gongquan stopped her. "Take little Eggshell with you, I'll take you there." "But I still need to go to Hyatt Regency." "I'll take you there?" Nan Gongquan replied smoothly before he pushed Su Yuran into the car. After his daughter and girlfriend settled into their seats, he finally drove off. "I've met Mo Ting before. From my standpoint, I don't want to be enemies with him." It wasn't that Nan Gongquan didn't have any hatred in his heart, but he knew that the Mo family wasn't the main culprit. Su Yuran looked at Nan Gongquan from the side and felt that this man was truly magnanimous. At least, if she was in his position, she might not be able to completely let go. "Little Eggshell, Daddy is great, right?" Su Yuran asked. "But I despise my daddy because he's not handsome enough," Little Eggshell said as she rested her chin on her hand. "He's not as handsome as the two boys' daddy." "Who said that?" Su Yuran immediately argued with Little Eggshell. Nan Gongquan was calm and introverted. He looked like a man with a story. On top of that, his appearance was a little wild, so he exuded the elegance of a mature man. This was completely different to Mo Ting's elegance. "Big sister, do you think my daddy is more handsome? Your daddy is more manly." At a time like this, Little Eggshell had no idea what manly meant. However, Nan Gongquan's words were extremely effective. He had a feeling that this little brat was obviously teasing him. If it weren't for Little Eggshell, he would have already made a move on her. Soon, the three arrived at Hyatt Regency. Tongning stepped out with the two rascals. As she watched Su Yuran personally step out of the car to pick them up, she immediately guessed that there was someone in the car. "Is Little Eggshell here today?" "Aha, I have a slight cold, so," Su Yuran explained. "It's okay, go ahead," Tongning said as she handed the two kids to Su Yuran. Su Yuran looked at Tongning gratefully. This was one of the things she liked and admired about Tongning. According to Tongning's current status in Beijing, she could treat the people that worked for her in the most arrogant manner, but she never treated or looked down on the people around her. This was probably the most elegant thing that a woman could do. Little Eggshell was very obedient as she naturally gave up her seat to the Mo twins. Meanwhile, as soon as Mo Zishi boarded the car, he chatted with Little Eggshell while Mo Zishi stared at Nan Gongquan like an adult. Nan Gongquan was surprised that a child could have such a gaze. So, he turned around and glanced at Mo Zishi before he said to Su Yuran, "This child is very special." "He is indeed very special," Su Yuran nodded. Su Yuran nodded her head. "Zichin doesn't like to talk, but everyone thinks he understands what the adults are thinking. Unbelievable." During this time, Mo Zishi and Little Eggshell got into an argument. At this time, Mo Zichin suddenly stepped in front of Mo Zishi and looked at Little Eggshell cautiously. On the surface, Mo Zishi was the older brother, but there were a lot of times when Mo Zichin was the one protecting him. The most obvious thing was the scar on his left cheekbone not long ago, wasn't it? Soon, the three children entered the school and Nan Gongquan led Su Yuran home. However, just as they arrived at the front door, Nan Gongquan suddenly grabbed onto Su Yuran's right hand as she unbuckled her seatbelt. What's wrong?" "Remember to take your medicine," Nan Gongquan instructed. "Okay, hurry and go to work," Su Yuran nodded her head. Su Yuran nodded her head and took a deep breath. "I'll go home, take some medicine and get some sleep. I should be fine after that." Nan Gongquan placed his hand on her forehead. Before she could react, he had already stepped out of the car and carried her out. "You have a fever." "I'm really fine," Su Yuran quickly explained. "I used to have a lot of colds in the past. I'll be fine after a while." "That was in the past. But, you have me now." After speaking, Nan Gongquan carried Su Yuran into the living room. Luckily, Mother Su wasn't home, so Nan Gongquan headed upstairs and placed Su Yuran on the bed in his room. "Did you forget? I live across the street. Let's not talk about it for now. Let's focus on reducing your fever first." Nan Gongquan ignored Su Yuran's protests as he pulled out some fever medicine. "It'll affect your work, only now do I know that. Falling in love can also make people lazy." Nan Gongquan pulled out his phone and gave his assistant a phone call. "I'll be arriving at the office later today." All he wanted to do was take care of Su Yuran. Chapter 1144. That morning, Hai Rui decided that The Ant Queen 2 would officially begin filming on the 1st of the following month. In reality, it was only a few days later. As the antagonist, Mo Ting naturally had to make preparations. But, because Hai Rui was in a stable state and Fang Yu and Lu Che were doing well, Mo Ting had time to spare. No one thought that the big boss would lose face by acting. After all, everyone in Beijing knew that Mo Ting was only willing to appear on-screen because of Tongning. This wife-doting demon, as long as Tongning wanted something, there was nothing he wouldn't do, so, acting in a film wasn't a big deal. The media followed up on Hai Rui's announcement and conducted interviews with all the actors involved. Even Old Long was prepared to give it his all. After all, who would dare to not treat Tongning's film well? As Su Yuran lay in her bedroom and watched the news, she turned to look at Nangong Quan. Tongning is quite good at making films. A good film is the result of a team's hard work. It's not right to put all the credit on Tongning alone. But, I can't deny that Tongning has perseverance, Nangong Quan said like he was looking at a piece of gossip. The Ant Queen's first film had such a difficult environment, yet she managed to produce it. She's indeed very serious. Nangong Quan, I really want to know if you feel unsettled by President Mo's achievements. Mo Ting relied on himself to get where he is today. Nangong Quan knew this better than anyone. His talent isn't something that anyone can compare to. After hearing this, Su Yuran suddenly felt that the relationship between him and Mo Ting was like that between two heroes and they appreciated each other. Nangong Quan admired Mo Ting, and Mo Ting naturally didn't dislike Nangong Quan. Actually, whether you're friends or competitors, the sparks between the two of you are bound to be very interesting. Stop talking. Take your medicine first. Nangong Quan turned off the noisy TV and placed the medicine in front of Su Yuran. If you want little eggshell to return to her room before school ends, you need to listen to me. Su Yuran's face turned red and she didn't know what to say. This man obviously looked like a gentleman, but at times like this, he was extremely domineering. It was almost too much for her. Yuran, hurry up. Okay, I understand. Su Yuran nodded her head, lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Of course, Nangong Quan did not make things difficult for her. After she fell asleep, he carried her back to his room. As for the task of picking up the three kids, he naturally left it to him. However, his actions completely infuriated old man Nangong. It was one thing that Nangong Quan didn't hold a grudge against him and he wouldn't actually lay a hand on his grandson. But, Nangong Quan actually picked the two kids up from school? Could it be that he had forgotten everything that had happened to the Nangong family? Let's go. The old man said to the driver angrily. Young Master Nangong, this is too disappointing. The driver echoed, Old mister, don't be too angry. If we don't give him a warning, he seems to have forgotten who he is. After saying that, Elder Nangong took out his phone and dialed a familiar number. He also instructed the person on a few things. Nangong Quan had no idea that Elder Nangong would be so disgusted by his act of sending the two kids to school for Su Yuran. 3 days later, the Ant Queen 2 held its opening ceremony. It wasn't as difficult as it was during the filming of the Ant Queen 1. Now, Tongning could easily get her hands on any resources she wanted. But, she still treasured her actors and actresses. During the opening ceremony, Old Long was dressed in a white shirt, but it couldn't hide his perfect figure. Standing in the middle of the stage were a few new actors, while Tongning was seated on the left. Mo Ting had no time to attend the opening ceremony. A large number of fans sent their blessings to the Ant Queen 2. Everyone wanted Tongning to finish filming in one day. That day, Elder Nangong attended a photo shoot with the production crew. His surname was Naozhang. After putting on some makeup, he made himself look 10 years younger and pretended that he had been in the US for many years in the field of explosives. No one discovered his identity as an explosives technician. Everyone treated Elder Nangong like he was a family member. Meanwhile, Elder Nangong looked at the main cast on stage and revealed a friendly smile. All he was waiting for was an opportunity. Even though he couldn't contain his excitement and wanted to blow up the entire set, for the sake of the Ant Queen 2, Hai Rui invested a lot of effort and money. They even built a base for the Ant Queen 2 and a few other buildings. Most of the Ant Queen 2's filming would take place here. Mo Ting was the last to enter the set. His scenes were mostly in the second half of the film, while he only needed to appear in the first half of the film. So, if Elder Nangong wanted to wait for this opportunity, he would need to stay on set for quite some time. Even so, Elder Nangong did not forget to remind his grandson of his identity. So, during this period of time, he frequently ordered people to place a photo of Nangong Quan's parents in Nangong Quan's car to remind him of the cause of his parents' death. Sometimes, he would even spray graffiti on Nangong Quan's car. In short, he wanted his grandson to remember everything that Nangong Quan had forgotten. Have you found out who did it? Su Yuran noticed that Nangong Quan had been quiet lately because of the photo, so she couldn't help but ask, why did these photos suddenly appear in my car? Nangong Quan put away the photo and replied, it's probably because someone was bored. Who would play a prank like this? I refuse to believe that the person behind this has no ulterior motives. This is a reminder. Nangong Quan looked down at the photo of his parents and replied, "It's a reminder for me not to forget about my blood feud. But, Chiu Jin is already dead, I will find out who did it." "Don't worry," Nangong Quan comforted. "As long as you and Little Eggshell are safe, leave everything else to me. I'm just worried about you," Su Yuran comforted. Su Yuran held onto Nangong Quan's hand and said, "It wasn't easy for you to forget everything." Nangong Quan did not say a word, because, just like Su Yuran said, it wasn't easy for him to forget everything. He didn't want to remember everything again. Chapter 1145. Because of this, Nangong Quan investigated the person that placed the photo in his car. But, because the person was extremely cautious, he did not find any clues. Elder Nangong was, after all, an experienced man. So, when he did something like this, he naturally didn't leave any evidence behind. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to live up to his reputation. "Little brat, all he does is indulge in women, and he even sent someone to investigate me. What an ingrate." Elder Nangong was even more displeased with Nangong Quan. But, even though he was displeased, he was still related to Nangong Quan. So, he couldn't really do anything to the only descendant of the Nangong family. As for Su Yuran, he had already investigated her. Although her background wasn't good enough for Nangong Quan, she claimed that she came from the military and was skilled. Thinking about the genes of his future great-grandchildren, he reluctantly agreed to let the two of them get together. But, Elder Nangong was not happy that Su Yuran was working for the Mo family. But, he wasn't in a rush. After the explosion was completed, he would return to the Nangong family and teach his useless grandson a lesson. Over the past few days, the Ant Queen 2 had already begun filming. But, because the early stages of filming were mainly non-acting, Elder Nangong spent his time on the set of the Ant Queen 2. He would either sneak a peek at the actors' scripts or sneak a peek at Old Long and the others. "I never thought that a little brat would come up with something so decent. She's definitely better than the rascal at home. The script was well written." But, of course, Elder Nangong could only see part of it. After all, opportunities like this were hard to come by. Even if they didn't get the chance to do the explosion and the script was leaked, Hai Rui would still suffer for a while. Tongning visited the set frequently because she wanted to confirm the acting skills of the young actors. Especially Luo Sheng, the amateur that she pulled out from the group. After so much training, he was actually able to act well with Old Long. After seeing this, Tongning was quite pleased. But, there was another reason why she visited the set frequently. She wanted to encourage the lead actors. Perhaps, there wasn't a single person in Beijing that didn't know how much she valued the Ant Queen 2. "All you do is play basketball all day. You have no idea what I need." This scene was between Luo Sheng and Old Dragon. The two were father and son, but also teacher and student. Luo Sheng's character, Little Chiu, was naturally rebellious. In fact, he even went down the wrong path and helped the villain. Old Long was an honest physical education teacher. In fact, he had another identity, which was a retired undercover agent. "Anyway, don't flirt with the girls in class right under my nose. A student should behave like a student. Since we're out on an outing, we need to relax. What's wrong with me being friends with a female classmate?" With a cigarette dangling from Luo Sheng's mouth, he looked at his father in disdain. "Even the way you stand is so annoying. If you have the guts, go to school and sue me." The old dragon was so enraged that he gave Luo Sheng a good beating. In a fit of anger, Luo Sheng left the group in a fit of rage. However, he had no idea that he had stumbled into a cave in his haste. The story of the Ant Queen 2 began. There was a lot of tension between the father and son, and the expression on Luo Sheng's face when he entered the mutated ant's cave was full of shock and fear. The scene froze here. "Cut, good, let's get ready for the next scene," Miss Chiao said as she stood up. As she spotted Tongning standing not too far away, she ran over excitedly and said, "Out of all the new actors, Luo Sheng is the most hardworking. I'm guessing he's afraid that he'll embarrass you. He's always been good at seizing opportunities, so I'm not surprised at all that he has such an effect. But, the other newcomers all have their own difficulties. It's hard to explain in a few words. It's best if you find an opportunity to communicate with them." After hearing this, Tongning nodded her head. "Okay." The others weren't lazy either, but they were always lacking something. Either they were talented, or they hadn't been pressured like Luo Sheng. Of course, Mo Ting still hadn't joined the set yet because his scenes would be focused on filming. But, because of this, Elder Nangong ended up staying on set for a good few months at a time. In the following days, Elder Nangong stopped sending people to place photos in Nangong Quan's car. He had no time to take care of his grandson, so he had to keep an eye out for opportunities on set. But Nangong Quan did not give up on his search for the person who placed the photos. Over the past few days, the Su family had reached the end of their road. Father Su couldn't find any funds, so he couldn't turn the Su family around. Meanwhile, Su Yuran's auntie wasn't doing too well either. Nangong Quan had promised to hire a team of lawyers to deal with the situation, and he did just that. By now, Su Yuran's auntie's reputation was completely ruined because she seduced her brother-in-law and tried to kick her sister out of the family. On top of that, she was in charge of divorce cases. She was an unscrupulous scumbag. Because of this, Father Su contacted Su Yuran and Mother Su multiple times to avoid his debts, but they ignored him. Left with no choice, Father Su had no choice but to pawn the Su family home. Otherwise, he would have no way out. As soon as Nangong Quan heard that the Su family was going to auction off the property, he naturally wanted to buy it. At least, he felt that Su Yuran and Mother Su would love it. He was just wondering what gift to give Su Yuran, but now, he had one. But, because he found out that Nangong Quan was the buyer, Father Su went straight to Springfall and begged Nangong Quan to see Su Yuran and Mother Su. Although Nangong Quan didn't want to see the scumbag, he did not make the decision himself. Instead, he personally gave Su Yuran a phone call. "Mr. Su is currently at my agency. Would you like to see him? Let's meet outside. I'm afraid he'll dirty your territory." Su Yuran replied. "Dress yourself up before you come out to see him," Nangong Quan cautiously reminded. At least, he needed Su Yuran to act like a rich woman that had married into a rich family. That way, Father Su would be devastated. Su Yuran nodded her head. Not only did she dress herself up, she also dressed up Mother Su. They agreed to meet at a place not far from Springfall because it was the safest way. Papa Su would never have imagined that after leaving him, the mother and daughter were living like fish in water. They were covered in jewels and jewels, as if they had become the wives of nobles. "Why did you want to see us? Speak." After arriving at the cafe, Su Yuran said coldly to Father Su, "Why isn't my good auntie here?" "Yuran. I'm at my wit's end. Please save me," Father Su said as he knelt in front of Mother Su. Papa Su knelt in front of Mama Su and begged, "I know you have money now. You can save Daddy." "Save you? Why should I?" Chapter 1146. "Look, you've married into a rich family and you don't have to worry about food and clothes, but I don't even have a place to sleep," Father Su cried. "Yuran, I've wronged you and your mother in the past, but you can't just stand by and watch me die. You're allowed to wrong us, but we can't wrong you?" Su Yuran's eyes turned red. "Dad, this is the last time I'm going to call you Dad." Afterwards, she pulled out a few $100s from her wallet and placed it in front of Father Su. "This is my last mercy." After speaking, Su Yuran turned her head and looked elsewhere. Seeing that his daughter's request was useless, Father Su turned to Mother Su and begged, Wifey, save me. "Don't forget, we've already signed our divorce papers," Mother Su said realistically. Mother Su told Father Su very realistically, "So, my suggestion is that you look for my sister. After all, you guys have been together for so many years. She will definitely save you. Wifey, don't look for me or Yuran again. I'd rather die than help you. So, even if you die on your knees in front of me, it's useless." Mother Su suddenly yelled. "Indeed, Yuran has a good boyfriend, but it has nothing to do with you. Do you remember how you've treated Yuran all these years?" Father Su was stunned as he knelt in front of the mother and daughter helplessly. "You guys are my only hope. When you were being intimate with that slut in front of me, why wasn't I your only hope? When you called that slut and kicked me over and over again, why didn't you say that I was your only hope? If you still had a bit of conscience, you wouldn't have ended up like this today. Hope? That's something that no longer exists between us." After hearing this, Su Yuran suddenly regretted taking out a few $100s. She had never seen her mother explode in anger, nor had she ever heard her cry out for help. What right did this jerk have to receive help from others? "Yuran, wifey, if you don't help me, I'm going to die," Father Su shamelessly threatened to kill himself. But, at this time, Nangong Quan walked into the cafe dressed in a smart suit and approached the mother and daughter. "Have you come to an agreement?" Su Yuran pointed at Father Su with her chin and humphed. He said, "Without us, he would die." From Su Yuran's eyes, Nangong Quan could tell that she couldn't bear to watch. So, he patted her on the shoulder and comforted, "Take Auntie out first, I have something to say to Mr. Su." Su Yuran glanced at Father Su and nodded her head. "I'll leave it to you then." After speaking, Su Yuran pushed Mother Su out of the cafe. As soon as the mother and daughter left, Nangong Quan sat down in front of Father Su. "I know Yuran is very kind, but I'm not. Mr. Su, I'm sure you've heard that I killed someone in the US. Nangong Quan deliberately used this incident to threaten Father Su. When Papa Su heard this, his palms began to sweat. So, paying off your debt is my bottom line. As for you asking for millions or even tens of millions, are you willing to live the rest of your life without worries? I'm sorry, that's not possible. I'm only doing this for Yuran's sake. If you continue to pester Yuran and her mother, you can forget about anything else. What do you think, Mr. Su? But, what am I going to rely on in the future? Father Su still wanted to live a good life. That's up to you. Whether you want to work or beg, it's up to you. After speaking, Nangong Quan stood up without saying another word to Father Su. This jerk didn't even deserve to be called a human. All Tongning hoped was that from now on, he would distance himself from Su Yuran and her mother. Father Su sat on the floor dispiritedly, but there was nothing he could do. At least, Nangong Quan had paid off his debt for him, so he no longer had to hide. As for how he was going to live from now on, he would have to look for his old mistress. At the very least, she was a lawyer. But, he had no idea that Su Yuran's auntie had locked herself up at home for 3 days straight. It was simple, she was too ashamed to do anything. She seduced her brother-in-law and abused her sister. She did all of the disgusting things she did. Of course, the bugs had to stick together to prevent them from harming others. Afterwards, even though Father Su's matter was resolved, Su Yuran was not happy. Seeing that she did not say a word after returning home, Nangong Quan began to tell her about his past. When I was in my teens, my family was turned upside down and my parents passed away. To protect my life, I had no choice but to leave my hometown and go to the US. I worked in a poor area on my own as an apprentice in a store. Then, I accidentally beat a local tyrant to death. As soon as I went to prison, I felt like my life was going to end like this. The first 30 years of my life were a blur. It wasn't until little Eggshell was born that I saw myself clearly. I wanted to raise this child well and she was my only motivation to live. So, Yuran, you're much luckier than me. At least, Auntie treats you wholeheartedly. After hearing Nangong Quan's words, Su Yuran suddenly hugged him from behind. Now that you're saying this, I'm starting to blame the Mo family. That's why, sometimes, I admire you for being able to let go of your hatred. That's because I believe that no one else can dictate their own fate. If you want to live a good life, then you need to work hard. There's no point blaming anyone else. The Mo family didn't do anything wrong, even if they destroyed my family. Don't say anymore. Su Yuran hugged him tighter. Don't say anymore. My heart hurts. From now on, you won't just have little Eggshell, you'll also have me. We'll both be by your side? Nangong Quan honestly revealed the dark side of his life. He even included the part where he went to prison. He wanted Su Yuran to understand everything about him. Su Yuran admired Nangong Quan's breadth of mind. Because of this, she began to understand and cherish Nangong Quan even more. I will definitely help you protect little Eggshell and make sure she grows up healthy and happy. In that case, you need to help her have a happy family first. Nangong Quan said with a deeper meaning, Yuran, marry me. After we get married, we can slowly fall in love. I can make up for everything that you're missing. But, I'm almost 40 years old. Can you understand the psychological crisis of an old man? But, what if I change my mind? If one day, you feel like I'm not treating you well and want to leave, you can leave at any time. I won't force you, Nangong Quan promised. But, I won't give you the chance to regret. Chapter 1147. In that case, I'll take a gamble. Su Yuran replied decisively. Gamble. Su Yuran used such a reckless word. I definitely won't let you lose, Nangong Quan promised. My promise to you will always be valid. Su Yuran buried her head in Nangong Quan's arms as he hugged her tightly. Although he looked tough on the outside, his heart was burning with passion. I'm sorry, I don't have the patience to wait any longer. I want to marry you right now. As soon as their marriage was decided, Su Yuran personally arrived at Hyatt Regency the next day to resign from Tongning. Although Nangong Quan didn't care, she cared a lot. When she thought about Nangong Quan's lonely life, she couldn't help but blame the Mo family. So, she couldn't continue working for Tongning. Can I ask why? Tongning asked even though she already knew the answer. In reality, she wanted to know how far their relationship had progressed. But, because it wasn't easy to find a good person like Su Yuran, she naturally cared a little more about her. If Miss Tang is worried about the kid's safety, I can recommend my friend. I'm sure she can do the job. But, Tongning shook her head and smiled. I'm not asking this because I'm worried about the kids. I'm simply concerned about you. Yuran, I want you to be happy. Su Yuran nodded her head. Actually, this had nothing to do with Tongning and Mo Ting. The couple's character and integrity were 1 in 100, so there was no need for her to take it to heart. It's because I'm getting married, Su Yuran replied. I'm getting married to Nangongquan. He's been on his own for so many years. I want to be by his side, Su Yuran said with a happy smile. We are both lonely people. Since that's the case, I wish you both the best, Tongning said as she hugged Su Yuran. Tongning stretched out her arms and gave Su Yuran a hug. From now on, you'll only be giving little eggshell. My 2 rascals are going to be jealous. Thank you, Miss Tang. Tongning shook her head. There's no need to thank me. It's fate that we met. Su Yuran said her goodbyes to the 2 babies and left Hyatt Regency out of respect. Although Tongning felt it was a pity, she could sense that Nangongquan truly needed Su Yuran. After all, both of them needed warmth. That night, Mo Ting returned home and Tongning told him about what had happened. When the time comes, send him a congratulatory gift, even though Nangongquan might not necessarily want it. Mo Ting held on to his 2 sons as he listened to his wife. When the time comes, get Lu Che to make arrangements. By the way, I will be joining the crew tomorrow. I know. Daddy, Big Sis doesn't want us anymore, Mo Zishi said with a pout. Of course, Mo Zichin didn't say much, nor did he express his displeasure. After all, it wasn't like he could make the decision. It's not that Big Sis doesn't want to abandon you. Big Sis also has the right to be happy, Tongning comforted her sons. Mommy will carry you, okay? Dad has to film tomorrow and it will be very tiring. Let him have a good rest. Mo Zishi looked at his brother and then at his father. He then slid out of Mo Ting's arms and led his brother to the playroom. After the 2 rascals left, Mo Ting wrapped his arms around Tongning and placed a kiss on her forehead. The 2 rascals are very sensible. Of course, don't you know who taught them that? Okay, I'm going to go wash up. I'll be joining the crew tomorrow morning. Tongning nodded her head and planted a kiss on Mo Ting's lips. My villain, I'm looking forward to your performance. Mo Ting patted her on the head. Even though she was already 30 years old, he still treated her like the young and inexperienced woman from the past. Afterwards, Tongning went to take care of Yen Er. This was the tacit understanding between the couple. As soon as they heard that Mo Ting was joining the crew, the staff on set of the Ant Queen 2 cheered. It wasn't common to see a big boss filming a film. Yet, this man's acting was outstanding. If it wasn't for Tongning, they would never have known that President Mo's acting skills were so outstanding. Apart from the staff who wanted to catch a glimpse of Mo Ting, the actors were also extremely excited. For example, Mo Ting's previous work, whether it was Emperor in ancient costume with Tongning or the Ant Queen 1, he had always amazed everyone. When on earth did he hone his acting skills? No one could get an answer. Early in the morning, the crew prepared to hold a welcome party for Mo Ting. But Mo Ting didn't like it this way. He simply told everyone to focus on what they needed to focus on. Everyone thought that big bosses liked to suck up to others. But, after joining the crew, Mo Ting was merely an actor. So, he had higher expectations for the people around him. As a result, Luo Sheng and Mo Ting had their first scene together. For Luo Sheng, this was a pleasant surprise. When it came to Mo Ting, apart from respect, he was also a little timid. Whenever he saw Mo Ting, he would feel nervous and afraid. As a result, Luo Sheng failed multiple times in his first scene. In the Ant Queen 2, Xiao Qiu greatly admired Mo Ting. He also wanted to break free from his father's control and become a person that could do whatever he wanted. So, in this scene with Mo Ting, he needed to be obedient. As the couple stood in a dark tunnel, Mo Ting's character, Meng Sen, demanded that Xiao Qiu learn how to resist. But, Xiao Qiu was very timid, so, Meng Sen continued to provoke him. Hit me. Hit me hard. Pretend that I'm your father. Take out all the pain you've suffered on me. As soon as Mo Ting got into character, he went from a respectable CEO to a gangster-like hooligan. His entire body emitted an unbearable sense of danger. Just from looking at his eyes, one could feel a sense of eeriness and fear. Cut. Luo Sheng, you don't look too good, Xiaomen said as she helped him up. Don't be nervous, I'm sorry director, please give me some time. Mo Ting was too powerful for Luo Sheng to handle. Mo Ting noticed Luo Sheng's state, so after he finished touching up his makeup, Mo Ting approached him and asked, do you know what the highest level of acting is? Transcendent. After hearing this, Mo Ting shook his head. Where can I find perfection? It's simple. You need to live like this person. Only when you become Xiao Qiu will you no longer be acting. Whether it's me, Tongning, Lin Xing or Bai Chendong, as soon as you get into character, you will become that person and no longer be yourself. Chapter 1148. Let me show you a demonstration. I will now act as Xiao Qiu. Mo Ting said to Luo Sheng. In that case, do you need someone to help you? Mo Ting shook his head as he stood up and walked over to a sandbag. At this time, Old Long spoke up for Mo Ting. Hit me hard. Mo Ting immediately put on a submissive expression as he raised his hand and walked over to the sandbag. As if it was someone he was acting with, he gave it a probing punch. Hit him hard. Did you not eat? The old dragon cooperated again. As Mo Ting sobbed, he stretched out his fists. As he cried, he vented his emotions. Unknowingly, his fists became heavier and heavier, until everyone heard a loud cry of relief. At that moment, the entire world fell silent. From the moment Mo Ting's emotions were built up to the moment he exploded, it only took a few seconds for him to go from weak to defiant. In fact, the pain and grievance he felt came from the bottom of his heart. After seeing this, Luo Sheng was shocked. The other minor actors were also shocked. What was acting? On his first day, Mo Ting had already given them a shocking lesson. Because of this, the production crew couldn't help but be impressed. Because of this, the production crew were reminded of how Tongning had previously tried her best to bring her emotions into her scenes. It was almost like the person she was playing wasn't her, but was herself. Old Long stood to the side with a smile. It seemed, Mo Ting had once again locked on to this year's Fei Tian Awards for Best Actor. The couple were born to be in the entertainment industry. Not too far away, Elder Nangong watched quietly as everything happened on set. He had a thoughtful smile on his face. After waiting for so long, his efforts were finally not in vain. Of course, at the moment, most of the scenes were non-acting and the most shocking scenes had yet to happen. So, the explosives technician was still in charge of other projects. This was requested by Elder Nangong. He claimed that he liked to be on set throughout the entire process because that way, he could better understand the film. But, since Mo Ting was already on set, it seemed, his death wasn't too far away. Because of Mo Ting's arrival, the entire production crew became more serious and energetic. Most importantly, the other minor actors also quickly got into character. After all, they learned a lot from Mo Ting. I really admire President Mo. With his status, he is just like any other actor. He eats and lives with us and doesn't receive any special treatment. That's why he's able to sit on the big boss's seat. Tongning is the same. The two of them seem to be serious about everything they do. To live a fulfilling life every day, you're really amazing. After a day of filming, Tongning personally drove over to the set to pick up President Mo from work. The people on set couldn't help but tease, "Miss Tang, you are way too punctual. Can't you let President Mo stay on set a little longer?" Tongning also laughed. "I've let you guys look at it all day, it's time for me to look at it too, right? I'm lovesick." They're showing off their affection. Mo Ting did not have the time to chat. He quickly changed his clothes and transformed back into his usual self. He then helped Tongning into the car and sat in the driver's seat. "Rest if you're tired. I'll drive." "This is a man's right and responsibility," Mo Ting laughed. Tongning shook her head helplessly. Just as she was about to say something, she noticed Elder Nangong standing behind Luo Sheng, looking at his script. Tongning furrowed her brows. She had no impression of this old man. "Have you seen him before?" Tongning asked. Mo Ting followed Tongning's gaze and shook his head. "I'll find out if I ask." What kind of rule was this for a staff member to peek at an actor's script? Of course, Tongning did not say anything. She simply told Mo Ting to investigate first. While the Ant Queen 2 was in full swing, Parasite wasn't to be outdone either. Nangong Quan was extremely satisfied with the progress of filming. Ever since he confirmed his marriage, Nangong Quan's life had undergone a drastic change. It was like he had lost a sense of melancholy and gained a sense of pureness. As a result, everyone in the agency began to wonder if Nangong Quan was in love, but they had never heard that he was in contact with anyone. So, they simply had no idea that Su Yuran was already living in his home. At that moment, the happiest person was Little Eggshell. Ever since Su Yuran revealed her relationship with Nangong Quan, Little Eggshell had begun to call her mommy. Su Yuran was elated to hear Little Eggshell call her mommy. However, the fact that the Mo family's 2 kids were sent to and from school instead of Little Eggshell caused a few rumors to spread. Of course, because the children did not know that the 2 boys were Mo Ting's children, most of the ridicule was directed towards the 2 rascals. "That big sister doesn't want you guys anymore. Kevin's little brother is an ugly freak." Because he used an English name at school, Mo Zishi was called Kevin. The students ostracized Mo Zichin because the scar on his face wasn't completely healed. As soon as he heard his classmates talk about his little brother like that, Mo Zishi immediately stood up with his hands on his hips. "If you insult my little brother again, I'm going to beat you up." Emozichan immediately pulled Emozishi back and ignored him. But, a moment later, the sound of a child crying could be heard in the classroom. The teacher immediately went forward to take a look, only to see that the child had tripped because the seat was tied together by a rope. Emozishi looked at Emozichan, but Emozichan acted like nothing had happened. It seemed, from this point onwards, the two brothers developed a tacit understanding. On the surface, Emozishi pretended to protect his little brother and bluffed, while Emozichan secretly made a move to protect the two brothers. This meant, between the two brothers, Emozichan was the one with the ability to make a move. The teacher searched for half a day, but still couldn't find the culprit. So, she refused to believe that the kids in the class could be so smart at such a young age. The two brothers were the powerless type in the class. However, this didn't make them feel inferior. It was as if they knew they had a powerful background, so they never took the bullying of the other children seriously. When you find out who my parents are one day, you're going to be scared to death. Little Eggshell felt a little guilty. After all, she was the one who stole Suyuran away, causing the two brothers to be the target of criticism from their classmates. They even said that their tutors didn't want them. Chapter 1149. So, Tongning found someone else to pick the two brothers up. This time, it was a young man that had just retired from the army. This young man was simple and honest, but he was able to make a lot of handmade products and was able to come up with a variety of styles to satisfy the Mo brothers. Apart from being simple and honest, he also had a girlfriend that he had been dating for 3 years. To help his girlfriend live a stable life, he accepted Tongning's offer to be the two brothers' bodyguard. Suyuran finally relaxed when she saw that the two treasures of the Mo family had someone to pick them up. But, little Eggshell couldn't help but care about the two brothers. So, every time she picked up a candy or a new toy, she would look for Emozishi after class. Emozichan rarely interacted with others. Even when little Eggshell approached him, he would let his guard down, but he would never initiate a conversation. But, the person that little Eggshell cared about the most was Emozichan. But, when she noticed that Emozichan didn't want to talk to her, she decided to find an opportunity to get close to him. She simply wanted to catch a glimpse of him. Children did not know much about gratitude and grudges. Their thoughts were still very naive. Meanwhile, Suyuran had already started preparing for her wedding. As Nangongquan was busy with work, Suyuran was in charge of all the small details. At this time, news of Nangongquan's marriage finally arrived. Everyone was shocked. Didn't this eligible bachelor just return to Beijing not too long ago? The industry was filled with beautiful women, but he didn't interact much with any of them. Yet, he was getting married? Soon, Suyuran's identity was revealed. She was the daughter of the previously bankrupt Su family. Although she wasn't rich, she wasn't poor either. But, to everyone's surprise, no one had heard anything about this beforehand. This could be considered as another Cinderella, flying into the branches of a rich and powerful family. Although everyone was suspicious, the two of them had not interacted with each other before, and now suddenly got married. What was the reason behind it? Nangongquan was afraid that the attention would cause trouble for Suyuran. But, Suyuran wasn't affected by the outside world. Instead, she continued to take care of little Eggshell, plan her wedding, and choose what she liked. I was afraid that the media would scare you. Hearing Nangongquan's explanation, Suyuran shook her head. I was prepared to be exposed a long time ago, so the current situation isn't too bad. But, if you have time, when can we go pick out a dress and wedding dress? Thinking that little Eggshell and Mother Su were already asleep, Nangongquan wrapped his arm around Suyuran's waist. Since the wedding is just around the corner, you can stay in my room from now on. Faced with such a direct invitation, Suyuran's face turned red. She knew what it meant. At this time, the crew were currently filming the climax of The Ant Queen 2. In other words, they were just about to start filming the scary part. So, it wasn't long before Elder Nangong got his revenge. But, strangely, Nangongquan sent someone to investigate Qiu Jin's neighbors and discovered something important. According to the auntie living on the top floor, she ran into Uncle Qiu with an old man when she was walking down the stairs. I looked at the time and saw that it was half an hour before Uncle Qiu committed suicide. Can you describe the old man's appearance? Nangongquan asked his assistant. The auntie said she couldn't remember clearly, but she remembered the old man had a black scar on the back of his hand. She saw it when she was walking down the stairs. Black Scar. Hearing this name, Nangongquan's expression turned a little ugly. Are you sure? The auntie said she's sure. It's not easy to forget something like that, his assistant replied. Call Beijing prison, Nangong Quan said anxiously. Nangong Quan said anxiously. Impossible, this is impossible, but, suddenly, a lot of things began to make sense. A few days ago, the person that shoved his parents' photo into his car, the person that constantly caused trouble for him and reminded him to remember his hatred, could it be that they were all the same person? Chapter 1150. If his grandfather was released from prison, it was highly possible that he would seek revenge on the Mo family instead of contacting him. After all, he could be considered an unfilial descendant. Nangong Quan immediately contacted the prison. In the end, he received news that his grandfather had already been released from prison for quite some time. It was just that no one knew about it. Since Zhou Jin was dead, where was his grandfather? Nangong Quan began to feel a little worried. If Elder Nangong wanted revenge, he would definitely look for the Mo family. But, there had been no news of him. What was he planning? Above all, he was about to marry Su Yuran. He didn't want to get involved in the past's hatred or get caught up in it. But, Su Yuran was still his family. Aside from Little Eggshell, she was the only one. Because of this, Nangong Quan was a little hesitant. At this point, all he could think of was to find Tongning. Mo Ting had already guessed that Elder Nangong was probably hiding around the Mo family, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But, he had no idea that Elder Nangong had already snuck onto the set of the Ant Queen too. After returning home that night, Nangong Quan stretched out his arms and hugged Su Yuran. Su Yuran sensed he was upset, so she asked, "What's wrong? Grandfather has been released from prison, but I don't know where he is right now. He definitely had something to do with Uncle Chio's death? What I'm afraid of now is that he will seek revenge on the Mo family." Old Master Nangong wasn't like the hooligans outside. He knew that his grandfather was ruthless and merciless when he made his move. If he really had the chance to deal with the Mo family would definitely suffer a heavy blow. After hearing Nangong Quan's words, Su Yuran fell silent. She understood how Nangong Quan felt. He didn't want his grandfather to continue killing, but he didn't know how to stop him. "Quan, I know you're in a difficult position, but you should step out and stop them. At least, don't drag innocent people into this mess. As you know, the Mo family currently have 3 kids. If something happens to Mo Ting or Tongning, what will happen to them? Think about Little Eggshell. She lost her mother when she was young. How painful was that?" Nangong Quan took a deep breath and nodded his head. "I'll find an opportunity to warn the Mo family. You have to pay attention to yourself. Didn't you collect a lot of photos a while ago? From the looks of it, your grandfather won't even let you off. If he finds out that you're ruining his plans, the consequences will be unimaginable. When that time comes, can't you protect me? Huh?" Nangong Quan did not forget Su Yuran's skills. "Of course I will protect you with my life." After hearing this, Nangong Quan laughed. "Silly, I don't need your protection. As long as you protect yourself and Little Eggshell, I won't have any weaknesses." Su Yuran hugged the man tightly. The more she understood him, the more she doted on him. Ever since he was young, he had carried a blood feud with him, but he had never blamed anyone. His breadth of mind wasn't something that others could compare to. Even Mo Ting wouldn't be able to do the same. Because of this, Nangong Quan ended up meeting up with Mo Ting the next day. Just like last time at Dynasty Hotel, the two men sat down quietly. This time, Mo Ting had completely let down his guard around Nangong Quan. "I asked you to meet up today because my grandfather has been released from prison." Mo Ting paused for a moment before his lips curved upwards. "Why did you tell me? You must be hoping that I don't know anything." "I don't know how he's going to hide around you. You and Tongning need to be careful. That's all I can do to help," Nangong Quan said. "Mo Ting, I've said it before, I didn't return to Beijing for revenge and I don't hate you. I simply don't know how to face the Mo family. Sometimes, I can't help but want to target them. You should be careful too. If your grandfather hasn't contacted you, it means that you are a possible target. Nangong Quan, I must admit that you are worthy of my respect. At least, if I was in your shoes, I wouldn't be able to not pursue the matter. In that case, let's swap places for you in our next life." The couple quickly ate lunch and went their separate ways. Afterwards, Mo Ting told Tongning about the news that Nangong Quan brought. "Nangong Quan told me that Elder Nangong has been released from prison. In fact, I don't know where he's hiding right now, but he's preparing to do something to us." "Did Nangong Quan tell you that?" Mo Ting nodded his head. "He sure is broad-minded." Tongning laughed. "If you weren't enemies, he would be a great big brother. Look at me, it's because I can't let go of my hatred that I ended up punishing Han Yufan and Mo Yuro. None of us are as good as him." Right now, the most important thing is to keep an eye out for any abnormalities around you, Enchanting said. You need to be on guard, but at the same time, you can't let him know in case he tries to do something to Nangong. I understand. Tongning nodded her head. With this, she would be more careful about her own safety. However, they still hadn't paid attention to the film crew. However, even after a while, Elder Nangong still did not make a move. Everyone couldn't help but be impressed by his patience. Meanwhile, the filming of The Ant Queen 2 was about to begin with all sorts of special effects. In other words, when it came to explosives, it was time. Because Enchanting wasn't present in the previous few scenes, Elder Nangong had completed his task well. As a result, his actions did not arouse any suspicions. But, according to the upcoming filming schedule, there was going to be an important scene between Enchanting and Old Long in 2 days. That would be the perfect opportunity to make a move. After waiting for so long, his efforts weren't in vain. Meanwhile, apart from the Mo family, Nangong was also searching for Elder Nangong. Seeing how anxious he was, Su Yuran had no choice but to help him. Isn't President Mo currently filming? Could it be that Grandpa is hiding in the crew? Hearing Su Yuran's words, Nangong immediately understood, but Enchanting definitely won't recognize Elder Nangong. Even if he has a black scar on the back of his hand, he could still be faking it. That's why I need you to go. I don't think President Mo will reject a request like this. Although it's a little awkward for you to enter the Ant Queen 2 with your identity, it's for the sake of their safety. Thank you, Yuran, for thinking of this. After speaking, Nangong stood up and gave Enchanting a phone call. And, of course, Enchanting couldn't reject. At this time, there was less than a day left until the explosion scene. Chapter 1151. To eliminate suspicion, Enchanting brought Nangong to the set of the Ant Queen 2. Of course, to avoid alerting anyone, no one knew that Nangong was hiding in Enchanting's black Rolls Royce. But, Nangong scanned through everyone on set, but he did not spot his grandfather, nor did he spot the old man with the black scar on the back of his hand. Because, there wasn't a single man on set that matched his age. No. Did you look through everyone? Enchanting reminded. If even you can't recognize Elder Nangong, then no one can. I haven't seen my grandfather in a long time. Nangong said coldly. In the past 20 years, I've only seen him 3 times. Since that's the case, I'll take you home, Enchanting said. Wait. Nangong gaze was suddenly drawn to a tall and skinny man. From the back, they looked similar. But, when the man turned around, Nangong realized that he was in his early 20s. However, his back looked a little weathered. In the end, he had no choice but to give up. Let's go. Enchanting rolled up his car window and drove out of the set. But, as soon as he left, Elder Nangong appeared at the spot where he parked his car. The 2 rascals were indeed alert and cautious. But, it wasn't going to be easy for them to find him. After spending so many years in the underworld, Elder Nangong's skills weren't learned for nothing. While he was in prison, a good friend had told him that Nangong already knew that he had been released from prison and predicted that he would do something to the Mo family. That's why he got into Enchanting's car and drove to the set of the Ant Queen 2. What a traitor. Of course, it was impossible for Nangong to recognize him. After all, not only did he make himself look 10 years younger, he also made a huge change to his appearance. Did these 2 rascals think they could recognize me? They must be dreaming. The old man lowered his head and worked on set. He did all the dirty and tiring work, so he won the respect and trust of many staff. Only when he revealed his fierce fangs did these people understand the consequences of trusting the wrong person. Nangong did not recognize Elder Nangong, but he did not give up on looking for him. As soon as Su Yuran found out, she comforted, "You've done your best? If I had visited him a few more times while he was in prison, perhaps things wouldn't be like this," Nangong said as he sat on the sofa with a hint of regret in his eyes. "This isn't your fault," Su Yuran said as she hugged Nangong. "That's enough, don't blame yourself. You've already done enough." Nangong felt like something wasn't right, but he couldn't figure out what it was. For some reason, he felt a sense of familiarity with some of the staff on the set of the Ant Queen 2. But, he couldn't pinpoint who it was. The old master must be there. It was just that he didn't recognize the person at the moment. After Enchanting returned home, Tongning asked Nangong how he went to identify the person on set, but she didn't find anything. Tongning smiled and comforted, "If you're already in a state of fear, how are you going to survive? Let's just be careful." Enchanting did not say a word. In reality, he was simply glad that he was the one filming the Ant Queen 2 and not Tongning. So, Tongning didn't need to appear in a dangerous place. This was a relief. No matter what Elder Nangong's plan was, as long as Tongning was fine, he had no weaknesses. After all, Tongning was his biggest weakness in this world. The next day, the crew prepared for an explosion scene. As an explosives technician, this was Elder Nangong's most excited and emotional moment. He wanted to use the perfect setup to create the most perfect mistake. As long as Mo Ting stepped on it, he would be blown to smithereens on the spot. That morning, as soon as Mo Ting left the house, Tongning felt a little uneasy. But, she couldn't explain why. Lin Qian had just arrived at Hyatt Regency to tell her about Superstar Media's situation. But, Tongning's mind was elsewhere. Ning Jia, what's wrong? Lin Qian asked. Did something happen? Tongning waved her hand, gesturing for Lin Qian not to speak. Let me think about it. Doesn't President Mo have important scenes to film in the next 2 days? Does the thing that you forgot have anything to do with this? After hearing Lin Qian's reminder, Tongning woke up from her daze and immediately gave the production crew a phone call to Qiao Man. Qiao Man, can the explosion scene be dealt with in post-production? If your post-production team is at this level, then there's no need. At least, we don't need any actors. In that case, can we cancel all of the recent explosion scenes? Tongning asked anxiously. Although Qiao Man didn't know why Tongning was interfering with filming, she had no reason to reject Tongning's request. Today's scene has already been set up. Let's finish filming first. We won't film the rest for now. Qiao Man, I feel like something's not right. Can we also cancel today's scene? What's wrong? Listen to me, I'll explain to you later. Although Qiao Man didn't know why Tongning was stopping them from filming the explosion scenes, she knew that Tongning wasn't an unreasonable person. Since Tongning made a request like this, Qiao Man had no choice but to stop filming for the day. Today's explosion scene will be pushed back, so let's film the next scene first, Qiao Man informed the crew. Qiao Man informed the stage supervisor and the other crew members. Especially the explosives technicians. Remove the hidden safety hazards and clean the set. The set had already been set up, yet Qiao Man suddenly wanted to stop filming? Director Qiao, what's the reason? You need to explain it to everyone. Otherwise, everything we've prepared today will go to waste. This is what the producer wants. If you have any questions, you can ask her directly. Qiao Man said this because she didn't know what Tongning wanted to do and why she was interfering with filming. But, as Mo Ting and the other actors were preparing in the waiting room, they looked at each other and asked, why did they suddenly change their scenes? Ning Jie doesn't normally interfere with filming. I think there's a reason behind it. Don't guess, just listen to the arrangements. Tongning didn't have time to discuss this matter with Mo Ting over the phone because she didn't want Mo Ting to be in any danger. Since Elder Nangong had his eyes on them and they couldn't find him, then they shouldn't give him any chances. Especially when it came to the explosion scenes. They couldn't give Elder Nangong any chance to escape. Chapter 1152. After the explosion scene was cancelled, Elder Nangong's expression was naturally not good. After all, this was a rare opportunity that he had been waiting for. Who would have thought, he was just one step away from killing Mo Ting. But, a phone call from Tongning completely destroyed everything he had planned. Most importantly, the explosives that he had set up were a huge safety hazard. After all, he had no intention of leaving Mo Ting with a chance of survival. But, now that filming had been cancelled, he had to clear out all the traps that he had set up. Otherwise, he would definitely alert the enemy. In reality, this wasn't because of Tongning's intuition, but because of her cautiousness. The explosion scene was such a big scene. If someone tampered with it, who could guarantee her husband's safety? But, because Qiao Man was about to film the next scene, she instructed the miscellaneous items team to clear out the set. So, before Elder Nangong appeared, she had to clear out the other traps first. But, unexpectedly, she triggered the switch that Elder Nangong had set up. All that was heard was a loud bang. The entire film studio was shaken by the loud bang. Afterwards, there was a strong explosion of fire and debris. Everyone was still in shock. But, as they watched the terrifying scene, a thought suddenly popped into their heads. An explosion. The entire set was filled with screams, arguments and questions. Afterwards, Mo Ting immediately called Lu Che to report in and called the police. In an instant, the explosion at the film studio spread like wildfire. Online, all sorts of rumors and guesses began to appear. How many people died? What caused the explosion? Now, it was all just a rumor. But, only Mo Ting and a few others knew the real cause of the explosion. After the police arrived, they quickly cleaned up the scene and verified whether there were any casualties. Luckily, even though the trap had been triggered, the person that triggered it jumped into a nearby pit in time, so he did not suffer any serious injuries. As for the staff closest to him, he only suffered superficial injuries. How lucky, no one was seriously injured. Where's the explosives technician? Where's the person in charge of the explosion? Did he start working without any identification? The police questioned the staff on set. At this time, everyone realized that Elder Nangong was nowhere to be found. At this time, he received a phone call from Nangong Quan. I've thought about it for a long time, but I couldn't figure it out. But now, I finally know who to watch out for, the explosives technician. Your phone call was late. Didn't you see the news? Mo Ting asked. Nangong Quan furrowed his brows and gestured for his assistant to hand him his phone. At this time, he finally found out from the news that an explosion had occurred at Hai Rui's film studio. Not long after, Tongning arrived on set. Don't force me to take action, Mo Ting said calmly as he opened his eyes and looked at Tongning. But, Tongning could see a deep look in his eyes that she had never seen before. Right now, I don't care if I'm threatened or injured. But, if it's you, I will definitely send him to hell. Your life is in danger today. I already want him to go to hell. Ting, don't always think of me as a weak person. With you around, I have nothing to fear. Don't think of me as a weak person. We're already used to the disputes in the industry. Isn't it just revenge? Isn't that common? Let's see how Nangong Quan is dealt with first. That old bastard can only return to the Nangong family for now. Indeed, because the old man had failed, he had no choice but to give up his identity as an explosives expert, and the police had nowhere to find him. Therefore, he could only return to the Nangong family by leaving the prison. But, was Nangong Quan happy? Not at all. It wasn't because he didn't want to see his grandfather, but because his grandfather had just placed a bomb in someone else's territory. What was even more frightening was that his grandfather didn't think what he did was wrong. He didn't respect life at all. Chapter 1153. It was only natural for Elder Nangong to return to the Nangong family. Everyone was well aware of the explosion at Hai Rui's film studio. But, since there were no casualties, Elder Nangong's efforts were for nothing. He never expected that Mo Ting's woman wasn't as naive as a rich family's wife. She was so cautious. Afterwards, Chiao Man asked Tongning, who had come to visit on another set, when you called me to cancel the explosion scene, was it because you thought it would be dangerous? Tongning gently nodded her head. To be honest, I recently encountered a small problem. Luckily, no one on set got hurt. After hearing this, Chiao Man laughed. Can you guarantee that the crew is safe right now? Tongning was silent for a few seconds before she finally nodded her head. Don't worry. Nowadays, everyone that enters and exits must go through a strict inspection. Even if it's an extra, they will be very picky. There won't be any more security issues. Since you've said it, I trust you. As for personal grudges, you guys can resolve it yourselves. By the way, the person that caused the problem was the explosives technician, right? Tongning nodded her head again. I never expected that the competition in the industry would be so vicious. Chiao Man thought it was a result of competition, so Tongning did not explain further. Since Elder Nangong was no longer in the dark, things were a lot easier to handle. Because of this, Mo Ting became even stricter with Hai Rui's staff. So, Fang Yu's report was quickly placed on Mo Ting's desk. President Mo, here's what you wanted. You must have heard that Elder Nangong has been released from prison. Use your connections and keep a close eye on him. At least, don't let him have another chance to make a move, Mo Ting instructed. Fang Yu, this is an important matter. I'm sure you understand that it concerns the Mo family's safety. Fang Yu nodded his head as he crossed his arms with a serious expression. Since you've decided to bypass Lu Che and leave this matter to me, I've already realized the seriousness of this matter. If there are any signs of trouble, immediately eliminate them at all costs. Understood, Fang Yu replied in seriousness. The reason why Mo Ting didn't allow Lu Che to get involved was because Elder Nangong would keep a close eye on Lu Che's movements and it wouldn't be beneficial to his work. Most importantly, Lu Che was more loyal than Fang Yu. In other words, his reaction speed wasn't as fast as Fang Yu's. This was also the reason why Fang Yu was able to be the director of PR for so many years and was known by the public as the reason there was no news he couldn't handle. Fang Yu was currently the vice president of Hai Rui. But, more importantly, he had been entrusted with an important task by Mo Ting. After Fang Yu left, Mo Ting walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out into the distance. He didn't know why, but the current him was so cautious. If this was in the past, he would have already razed the Nangong family to the ground. Because of Tongning, he had to restrain himself. Afterwards, Hai Rui released the results of their investigation to the public. They confirmed that the cause of the explosion was man-made and that the explosives technician with the surname Zhang had used a fake identity to infiltrate Hai Rui's crew. The police will continue to investigate, but the public has a very bold guess. Who could have such a huge grudge against the Mo family? Only the Nangong family could do it. If this was really done by the Nangong family, then isn't their method too lowly? They blew up the film base just like that. Fortunately, no one died, so, when the big bosses play with the big bosses, they directly use guns? Netizens started to ridicule the explosion and point their fingers at the Nangong family's Springfall film and television. However, Springfall did not step out to provide an explanation. This was because Mo Ting and Nangong Quan had a tacit understanding. At least, they had to attract the public's attention so that Elder Nangong would behave himself. Nangong Quan imagined countless scenarios where he would see his grandfather again. But, he definitely wouldn't see him like this. He was sitting in his office with a disdainful expression and a cigarette in his hand. Of course, without his disguise, Elder Nangong's hair was white and the black scar on the back of his hand was revealed, making him look like a gangster. "My dear grandson, grandfather is back. But, you don't seem happy." Nangong Quan put down the documents in his hands and looked at Elder Nangong. He then got straight to the point. "Grandfather, I'm already in my 70s. It's time for me to enjoy my old age. It's a pity. My muscles and bones are still strong, so I can still move." Elder Nangong laughed. "I know my grandson is about to get married and he has an adorable daughter. Yet, you're complaining that an old man like me is a hindrance and shouldn't have been released from prison. Grandfather, apart from Little Eggshell, you are my only relative. But, I can't agree with you seeking revenge on the Mo family. Do you still want to go back in prison? The Mo family owes me that. They should still be. No one owes you anything. This world doesn't allow evil to exist. Don't you know what you've done in the past? Even if it wasn't the Mo family, there was still the Zhang family and the Li family. Destruction is your only way out," Nangong Quan said coldly. "What I want to do is none of your business, you rascal. My abilities are indeed limited, but I won't sit idly by," Nangong Quan replied firmly. "Don't force me to put justice before family." After hearing this, Elder Nangong sneered, "You've indeed grown up. Aren't you afraid that I'll do something to your fiancé? I won't compromise with anything that's wrong. Many years ago, I stabbed someone in the US and ended up in prison. Even today, I'm still the same. I can't be a coward, but you are, because you can't admit to your own mistakes." "Great, that's great." The grandfather and grandson glared at each other. But, in the end, Elder Nangong backed down. "You weren't the one in prison. You can't understand how I feel." Nangong Quan no longer felt the need to talk to Elder Nangong, so he called his assistant over. "Take Elder Nangong to the villa to get some rest. I already made arrangements." "No need. I feel more comfortable on my own." After speaking, Elder Nangong turned around to leave Springfall. But, Nangong Quan held him back. "Did Uncle Chiu die because of you? That's because he was too mentally weak. Over 20 years ago, you weren't able to defeat Elder Mo on the battlefield. Now, over 20 years later, you still want to use such a dishonorable method to defeat the Mo family. Grandfather, only rats and cockroaches would do such dirty and unfair things. Do you really think highly of yourself?" Elder Nangong laughed as he waved his hand. However, he had already expected that the grandfather and grandson would part ways on bad terms after seeing Nangong Quan. After all, their values had always been different. Chapter 1154. Not long after Elder Nangong was released from prison, he headed to the US. As soon as he returned, he snuck onto the set of The Ant Queen 2. Up until this point, he still hadn't fully understood the extent of Hai Rui's development. As the leader of the entertainment industry, Mo Ting represented the industry's authority. Under his management, Hai Rui entered a virtuous cycle and nurtured countless superstars and top actresses. Elder Mo had already retired a long time ago. But, apart from doing some shady things, what else could he do to compete with the Mo family? After all, he had missed out on 20 years of his life. Yet, Nangong Quan naively thought that he could compete with Hai Rui if he took the right path. Elder Nangong returned to the place that his friend had prepared for him and told him about the explosion at Hai Rui's film studio. His friend sighed and said, "Elder, to be honest, I was released a few years before you and it took me a long time to reintegrate into the world. This is no longer the era where we fight and fight. Everything has to be done according to the law. Plus, the police are very efficient these days. So, I'm afraid the path that you want to take won't work, his friend said from the bottom of his heart as he puffed out a ring of smoke. No wonder your grandson doesn't want to get involved in any more trouble. It wasn't easy for him to get to where he is today. To put it bluntly, if he gets implicated because of you, then everything he's done will go to waste. Besides, he's right. If you can't hold the Mo family back on the battlefield, then there's nothing to be happy about even if you win. So, what are you trying to say? What I'm trying to say is, you're smart. Go back and help your grandson expand Springfall. Then, on the battlefield, you can steal the Mo family's business and artists. Isn't that more interesting? At least you won't be as cowardly as you are now. Elder Nangong took a puff of his cigarette and fell into deep thought. To be honest, you didn't manage to blow Mo Ting up this time. So, you won't get another chance like this again. How could he ask someone who was used to walking the crooked path to suddenly walk the right path? Plus, you're an experienced person. There are plenty of dirty things in the entertainment industry. Isn't this more suitable for you? Over the past few years, I've made a small fortune. Thank you for taking care of me. As long as you need it, I can invest in you at any time. Old Master Nangong took a deep puff and nodded. Let me think about it. Although Old Master Nangong didn't want to admit it, more than 20 years had passed and the world had changed drastically. Where else could he put his ambitions to? Only the entertainment industry that he was somewhat familiar with. Just like what his good friend had said, rather than sneaking around, it was better to come out openly and discuss the Mo family. They would fight to the death like this. By this time, Nangong Quan's wedding date was approaching. For safety reasons, Nangong Quan did not invite too many people. After all, he and Su Yuran did not have any friends or family. Other than Little Eggshell and Auntie Su, they didn't have anyone else to invite. Because of this, Nangong Quan felt extremely guilty towards Su Yuran. I've really wronged you by making you marry me like this. It's not up to us to decide how many relatives we have. So what if we have a few people? So what if we have a few hundred people? I'm marrying you, not your relatives or friends. Nangong Quan took a deep breath and finally felt relieved. I'll treat you even better, I'm already satisfied, okay? At least, I'm Mrs. Nangong. Don't other people think I'm a rich woman? Su Yuran joked. Plus, these are special times. As long as I can be by your side, I don't mind doing anything else. I'm already satisfied. I'm lucky to have met you. Nangong Quan hugged Su Yuran tightly. Of course, Su Yuran felt the same way because she deeply doted on Nangong Quan. She doted on his magnanimity, but she also doted on the fact that he was stuck in a dilemma. Afterwards, Su Yuran received an anonymous gift. Although it didn't have a name on it, she could guess that it was from someone else. Take it. Nangong Quan said, afraid that Su Yuran would be put in a difficult position. The couple are very thoughtful. Sometimes, the Mo couple's enemies were more important than the people around her. For example, Father Su and her auntie. But, the next morning, Nangong Quan returned to his office to see his grandfather. He thought that after their argument, Elder Nangong wouldn't want to see him again. Who would have thought? Don't look at me like that. Although you said a bunch of shit that day, it wasn't without reason, Elder Nangong said as he sat down in front of Nangong Quan. That's why I've decided to come back and invest in your business. Nangong Quan looked at Elder Nangong cautiously in confusion. He was afraid that Elder Nangong had obtained his money through dirty means again. Don't worry, it's all clean money. I won't make a move on the Mo family apart from business. I'm sure you're satisfied, Elder Nangong said in seriousness. Are you serious? Do you think I need to lie to you? Elder Nangong humphed. You're getting married, so you need someone to officiate your wedding. Do you really think the Nangong family doesn't have anyone else? But, I need to make a deal with you. When it comes to business, there's no room for deception. I won't go easy on the Mo family. You can't interfere with my decision. Grandfather, as long as you're doing the right thing, who can stop you? Nangong Quan replied. Rascal, it's time for me to meet up with an old friend. Seeing the sincerity on Elder Nangong's face, Nangong Quan let down half of his guard. After all, he still needed to see if Elder Nangong would do as he said. After all, he was probably the only person in the world that worried so much for the sake of his enemy. Of course, Elder Nangong's return also meant that he and Mo Ting would never be able to sit down and chat as friends. After all, there was still a grudge. After hearing about this, Su Yuran felt a little uneasy. But, he was still Nangong Quan's grandfather, so she needed to be tolerant. As for how things would turn out with the Mo family, she couldn't imagine it. In reality, she was well aware of how much Nangong Quan wanted to have friends by his side. Mo Ting was someone he had acknowledged since he was young, but they were destined to be enemies. Soon, Elder Nangong officially returned to the Nangong family and invested in Springfall. He also announced that he wanted to expand the company. As a result, Springfall immediately became one of the top 3 companies in the entertainment industry. In other words, Springfall had a lot of money. Seeing this news, Tongning was a little worried. So, she said to Mo Ting, Elder Nangong has seen the script of the Ant Queen too. You and I have seen it with our own eyes. If he's any more despicable, I think we may be in trouble again. Isn't the battlefield a lot more interesting? Mo Ting asked calmly. Chapter 1155. As for Elder Nangong's return, everyone in the industry had their own opinions. After all, there hadn't been a competitor that could compete with Hai Rue in the past few decades. So, Springfall's development was obviously meant to reshuffle the industry. Mo Ting had been the big boss for so many years, so someone was bound to challenge his authority. But, right after Hai Rue's film studio exploded, Elder Nangong announced that he was investing in Springfall and officially returning to the entertainment industry. This timing was indeed a bit of a coincidence. The Mo family and Nangong family were bitter enemies and they were both competitors in the entertainment industry. So, a battle between the big bosses was bound to be even more exciting. It wouldn't be as simple as destroying Hai Rue's film studio. In short, the public simply had to sit back and enjoy the show. Elder Nangong had indeed looked through parts of the Ant Queen 2 script, but he only looked at the scenes of individual actors. If it was someone else, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. But, he was different. Although he had agreed not to make a move against the Mo family in other aspects of the business, he was still very good at making his opponents suffer. The Ant Queen 2 was Hai Rue's most important project next year. After all, Tongning relied on her reputation to bring the Ant Queen 2 to the international stage. So, apart from making Parasite a hit, Elder Nangong's other important task was to make the Ant Queen 2 fail. Of course, there was no need for him to replicate it. All he had to do was spend a large sum of money to contact an overseas team and share his understanding of the Ant Queen 2 with them. Then, with the help of Hollywood's post-production, he could produce a new film. That way, the Ant Queen 2 would clash with an overseas film next year. That would be a spectacular scene. Would Tongning be the one copying Hollywood? Or would Hollywood be the one copying Tongning? As long as the American film studio refused to admit to it, Tongning would always be the one copying Hollywood. After all, did anyone believe that a Beijing producer could produce a film that Hollywood would copy? Only a ghost would believe that. Of course, Elder Nangong planned all of this quietly. After all, it was a huge project. First, he needed to convince the other party, which required a lot of effort. But, the US operated on capital. So, he believed that as long as he offered enough money, everything could be negotiated. Nangong Quan had no idea. After all, ever since Elder Nangong invested in Springfall, he had not done anything stupid behind his back. It seemed, he was seriously integrating into the world. Who would have expected that he had dug such a deep pit for the Mo family? Soon, it was time for Nangong Quan and Su Yuran's wedding. As they didn't invite a lot of guests, they held a private ceremony inside the church. After Elder Nangong became the witness for the couple, the first thing he said to Su Yuran was, "Hurry up and give the Nangong family another grandchild." Su Yuran smiled as she greeted her grandfather. But, deep down, she was feeling uneasy about this old man. Mother Su sat in her wheelchair, looking at old man Nangong from afar. Before this old man appeared, everything was perfect. But now, she felt like the Nangong Quan couple's life was about to enter a whirlpool. She was afraid that her daughter would be involved in the feud between the rich and the powerful. Little Eggshell, on the other hand, was excited because she finally had a mother. As a little flower girl, she stayed by Su Yuran's side and didn't want her to leave. The newlyweds announced their vows and the ceremony was a success. Nangong Quan and Su Yuran's wedding ended with a group photo of the 5 of them. However, photos of their wedding were only released to the media afterwards. On their wedding night, Mother Su took little Eggshell to bed and left some time for the newlyweds. As soon as he saw Su Yuran in her white dress, Nangong Quan wrapped his arms around her apologetically. "I feel bad for marrying you so easily." "I understand," Nangong Quan replied as he hugged Nangong Quan. Su Yuran hugged Nangong Quan back. "I know that with grandfather around, you're a little nervous. I swear, one day, I'm going to make it up to you with a grand wedding. It's not that important. A wedding is just a ceremony. Look at them, they haven't even had a wedding yet, but aren't they still very happy?" Su Yuran shook her head to show that she didn't mind. Quan, do you know why I insisted on marrying you so quickly? Nangong Quan looked at Su Yuran and at his wife. His eyes sparkled like the stars in the night sky. Because I don't want you to face everything on your own. I want to be by your side. Even if I can't help you with anything, at least I can share your burden and be a good wife to you. I will take good care of myself and little eggshell. That's enough, for me, you've already done enough. Nangong Quan's heart warmed. He knew that he didn't marry the wrong person, and he also knew that little eggshell didn't choose the wrong person. The brave woman in front of him was indeed brave enough to enter the tiger's den, all for the sake of the stubbornness and love in her heart. Nangong Quan couldn't take it anymore, so he unzipped Su Yuran's dress. Are you ready? Su Yuran's face turned red as she nodded her head. The white dress fell to the ground as Nangong Quan carried Su Yuran in his arms and placed her on the soft wedding bed. This was the night of their wedding. That night, Tongning snuggled up in Mo Ting's arms as she drank red wine. The couple had never been so relaxed before. They simply leaned against each other as they drank and chatted. Ting. Nangong Quan and Yuran got married today. I never expected them to be so fast. As long as they need each other, they can't wait to be together. Mo Ting stretched out his hand and stroked Tongning's chin as he lazily closed his eyes. I heard from Fang Yu that Elder Nangong is interested in contacting a Hollywood film company. After hearing this, Tongning immediately flipped over. What does he want to do? I don't know yet. The only thing I'm sure of is that he will continue to make small moves in the future. But, no matter what he wants to do, I will tell him that the entertainment industry is no longer the same as it was 22 years ago. This industry is no longer ruled by him, but by me. Tongning lay back down and wrapped Mo Ting's arm around her neck. Since he wants to play, then let's play with him. His unyielding spirit is very commendable. Tired? Mo Ting asked after seeing that Tongning had stopped moving. Seeing that she didn't respond, he reached out for a blanket and wrapped it around her. So, he allowed Tongning to lean against him. Even if his entire body was numb, it didn't matter. He couldn't bear to let her go. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.